The story begins with Xiao holding a knife, thinking he's about to face that unbeatable disaster again, wondering what he would do if he could redo everything after being betrayed. Meanwhile, those around him start commenting, questioning what's happening with the second son of the Zhou family. They mention that all those cows belong to the old Zhou family, and they will be slaughtered. They say he usually takes good care of these cows, so they wonder what's wrong with him today. Even if he was truly crazy, Joshua thinks he has no time to waste and is about to kill a cow. Just then, a woman appears and tells him to forget it. She says he could pretend he's joking and reminds him that even if he killed all the cows in the family yesterday, at most, he could only raise the price by 100,000 yuan. She says directly to his face. She wouldn't take a person like him and tells him to stop dreaming. She also mentions that young Master Lin promised to marry her. He gave her 200,000 yuan in a car. She says everyone knows the history of the Xiao Lin family and asks what Zhou Xiao can do. When he doesn't even have a cow left, people start commenting that Zhou Xiao can't do anything, and a man asks if he's doing this for a woman. Calling him a fool, they say it's not worth killing cows for a girl, then comment that she could introduce him to another woman. Joshua asks if they're done and tells her to leave. If she had been silent, the woman angrily puts out her cigarette and says she shouldn't have come there to convince him, because he really doesn't know how to treat women. As she leaves, others come to the village asking what Joshua is doing. Why is he trying to kill the cow? They demand he put down the knife. These people are his parents. So he puts down the knife, hugs his parents, and says everything is fine. Everyone comments that finally everything has been resolved. Joshua then says that this time he will protect the family, looking out for his brother and sister too. His mother asks what's going on with him, and his father wonders what he means by protection. Joshua replies that he's not crazy, but those cows need to be killed. For reasons he can't explain right now, he asks them to trust him and says that if they trust him, they shouldn't stop him. They look at each other for a few seconds. After thinking for a while, his father says he doesn't know exactly why he wants to kill the cows, but he knows he's a college student, and certainly smarter than all of them put together, so his father says he will help him with the slaughter. The woman there tries to convince Zhou's mother not to do that, but his mother responds that she is the crazy one, that she will also help with the slaughter. People start commenting that the Zhou family has gone mad. They say it's no surprise that the son of the Zhou family was rejected by the Lin girl, but Zhou Xiao knows he doesn't have enough time. He thinks he has less than a few hours left, so they need to act quickly. He says he needs 3 people to help with the slaughter, and that he will pay 500 wen to anyone who helps immediately. People have changed their minds and quickly offer, raising their hands, waiting for the money, and started the butchering job, not long after Joshua called to say that this time all the livestock of the family were sold. He said it was urgent and he would accept half the market price as long as they bought everything at once. Soon after, everyone arrived by truck, took the cattle carcasses, and left a bag of money. They asked why his son was doing this. Because they were losing a lot of money selling at that price, but Joshua replied that soon they would understand why he did it. Right now, all they needed to do was go home, and until he returned, no one could open the gate, no matter what happened. Joshua's father said he trusted his son because he had never been wrong about anything, and the only thing they could do now was to help him. Before leaving by car, Joshua told them not to open the gate for anyone, no matter what, so he went into town with the money. At exactly 4:11 p.m., he thought that the reserves in the warehouse could feed the family for a month. But the most important thing right now was weapons, medicine, and ammunition, because in less than 2 hours, the apocalypse would begin. All livestock would turn into brutal, bloodthirsty beasts, starting to attack everything they encountered. Soon, those who were bitten would begin to show similar symptoms. They would lose their senses. They wouldn't feel pain, wouldn't fear anything, and would only crave flesh and blood. Once bitten, injured, or infected, it would be inevitable after a month. The number of infections would rise globally, but there would be no safe land left, and a year later, there would be less than 1 million survivors. In his past life, Joshua witnessed all these disasters, and due to not being prepared, he lost his father, mother, and siblings. He couldn't protect them. Joshua thought he didn't know exactly why he was reincarnated, but he was sure that this time everything would go smoothly. There would be no repeat of that tragedy. With the money he had, he went into town and bought a lot of supplies, including a diesel generator, all kinds of cables, wires, flashlights, batteries, a range of defensive tools, as well as medicine, medical supplies, painkillers, antibiotics, gas, and everything that could be useful. But the most important thing right now was firepower. He knew that in the early stages, the only way to survive was to have enough weapons to contain a horde of monsters. So he went to see a salesman, who said the guard below told him that someone wanted to do business, and asked if it was the ex-boyfriend of his secretary. Joshua placed a bag full of money on the table and said he was really there to do business. He said he had 100,000 yuan in cash in that bag. The salesman asked if that money was for her, implying it was for his secretary. He even mentioned that Zhou Xiao seemed to be in love with her, as that would be the price to have her as his wife, his secretary, Xiao Qing. She quickly replied that no, she no longer had any relationship with Xiao, but he explained that it wasn't like that. He wanted to use the 100,000 to buy 1,000 pounds of black powder from the seller, Mr. Lin Jia, feeling outraged, thinking it was a joke, and responded that he was a serious producer who didn't work with anything illegal. Only Xiao looked him straight in the eye and remembered that last December at the Changfeng Lin Forestry Factory, he had seen everything. He asked if he remembered the woman in the green dress. Mr. Lin Ji was clearly worried because he knew it was true, so Xiao clarified that he just wanted the explosives and wouldn't tell anyone. He just wanted the product. Mr. Lin then called his secretary and said he hadn't checked the inventory, and it had been a bit humid lately. There might actually be some explosives and they needed to handle it somehow. He asked Xiao Qing to arrange for the disposal, and of course, she understood and complied as she passed by Xiao. He said that Rule had taken care of them and their family, and they would be forever grateful for everything she had done. He also mentioned that if she needed anything, he would be ready to help. Then looking at Mr. Lin, Joshua said he really enjoyed doing business with him. Mr. Lin replied that the boy was much more interesting than before. Then Joshua returned home with his car completely loaded with goods. He thought he still arrived on time and that nothing had happened. As soon as he arrived, he told his parents that he was back. His brother was also there and looked at him asking what was going on with Joshua, why he was so different. Joshua asked his brother if he was back, and he said yes, but commented that he had heard Joe sold off the whole family's cattle. Joe said he would explain that later, and then asked where May was. His brother replied that she hadn't come back yet, which surprised Joe because in his previous life, May had definitely been home by now, so he began to wonder if his actions had caused a butterfly effect, if she wasn't home because of him. Immediately, Joe said he would go look for her and asked his brother not to let anyone into the house, not to open the gate for anyone at all. He said he would go into town to pick up May and would be back soon. His brother was confused about what was happening, just standing there while Joe ran off. Speeding up the car to try to find her, he thought that on the first day, animals would be the first things to transform. But some humans too, especially at school, because there were so many people crowded there. He knew it would collapse much faster than the village, and of course, May was still at school. Determined, he swore that this time he wouldn't lose anyone. But Joe was so focused on getting there that he didn't pay attention to the road and ended up crashing into an animal. Only it wasn't an ordinary animal anymore. It had become a mutated creature. The mutation had begun. At that moment, what had happened an hour ago at school was being explained. Students in class were talking about Joe. Joe Xiao, the famous one, had said he sold everything his family owned just to give his girlfriend a gift. And he was definitely the dumbest guy in town. One of the girls looked at May and asked if that was true since she was his sister. The girl also commented. She heard that May is dating the rich kid from the Lin family's fireworks factory and that Joe is definitely crazy. Maybe his whole family is too. At this moment, May stood up, clearly annoyed, and the girl teased her even more. She asked if May was angry, and if she was wrong, she pulled out her phone and said the video there proved everything. Without thinking twice, May slapped the phone, making it fall to the ground. The girl got angry and asked if she was crazy. But the next thing she knew, the teacher had walked down the hall. May quickly bent down to pick up the phone. She pretended that she had accidentally dropped it and was returning it, but she intentionally raised the phone for the teacher to see. The teacher confiscated the device immediately and reminded her that school rules don't allow phones. He said he would only return it to the girl's father, and her dad would have to come to school to get it back. The teacher told May to return to her seat, and she politely replied that everything was fine. She apologized to her classmates, saying she didn't see the teacher coming and would be more careful with her phone next time. The girl was even angrier about this, and then when it was time to leave, no one came to pick up May. That girl started bullying her, asking why she wasn't brave anymore. May then remembered that she was suspended that day along with that annoying girl. The girl asked why May wasn't answering, and without waiting, pulled out a sharp knife. Josiah was coming and thought he was in front of the school but couldn't find May. At that moment, he noticed several students running desperately out of the building. Just then, the girl threatening May started vomiting a lot of blood, and May fainted, worried, just walked outside. In reality, she wasn't worried at all. She then ran outside but realized that not only that girl but many others were also vomiting blood, and they were attacking each other. May was very scared, not knowing what was happening until she saw a zombie running straight toward her at the end of the hallway. Panicked, she tried to run away, but to make matters worse, the girl who had bullied her also stepped out of the room. She had turned into a zombie, and the first thing that creature did was jump on May, trying to bite her. But just at that moment, just when she was about to be bitten, Joe Xiao appeared and kicked the zombie girl hard in the face, pushing her away from May. Still lying on the ground, she looked at him in confusion and asked her brother what he was doing there. But the fight wasn't over yet. The noise attracted the attention of another nearby zombie. Joshua looked at his sister and commented that it was really embarrassing to hear her scream for help so loudly without wasting any time. He moved forward, and with a precise stab from his knife, he decapitated the zombie. then said he was only there not to save her, but to laugh in her face. Of course, she reacted by calling him an idiot, while a horde of zombies began to surround the school on their way back. They saw a zombie in the middle of the road gnawing on a corpse, but it was hit hard by a truck, and clearly, Xiao was driving. It seems like Mei is a bit worried when she comments that it looks like a zombie game, but too realistic even though she feels scared. She said it's unbelievable when he kicked the zombie to save her. Joshua told her it was okay if she wanted to cry. He wouldn't laugh in her face this time, then he explained that the world has ended, zombies are everywhere, and people will have to learn to adapt and survive, but he told her not to worry because her brother is here. And he promised that he would take care of everything. He said the whole family would be fine, and Mei replied that she trusts her brother. Then they finally returned to the village. When they arrived, everyone commented that they were back. Xiao asked if anything happened at home, and his mother replied that they only heard people screaming outside, but no one dared to go out and check. Now everything is quiet. Joe finds this strange because in his previous life, 3 to 5 people went missing that night. But he remembers that the mutated zombies fear sunlight, so if they survive that night, the next day would be enough to secure the house. However, he knows that the night will be tough. His brother then asks why he bought so many resources. It seems they are preparing for a fight. Joshua replied that he would explain later and asked him and his father to gather everything inside the house. He said that no matter what happens, they must protect the house. He also said he would go out to find people and would be back soon. Mei trusts him, telling everyone to believe in him because her brother is different. He knows what he's doing running on the rooftops. Joshua also thinks that Mei is right. His body truly looks different, as if it has undergone some changes since he turned back time. And if he can find that person, and if they still have the same abilities as in their previous life, it would be a huge help. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a few zombies are banging heavily on a door in a building. A woman is trying to calm everyone down, asking why they are so desperate. She thinks they are just crazy customers complaining that something is missing in the store. Not knowing that it is actually zombies, everyone inside is trying to resist with makeshift weapons, but that won't last long. Suddenly, someone bursts in, smashing everything, crushing the zombies and sending them flying. And of course, it's Xiao. With just a bread knife, he easily clears the place, making everyone start to wonder if that is Joe from the Xiao family. Then he looks straight at the woman standing there, the one he has been looking for. Beside her, a zombie is preparing to attack. But Joe steps forward and easily slices the monster's head in two. The woman looks at him in surprise and asks if that is really Joe. And what is he doing there? Xiao grabs her face, examining it carefully and thinking how lucky it is. There are no blood stains in her mouth or eyes, which means she is safe. He then confirms in his mind that it is indeed Xiao Bing. Except for right now, she still doesn't have all the power she had in her past life. Joe asks Bing if she's hurt. Even if it's just a small scratch, Bing replies that she's fine, but everyone is still completely shocked. One of the locals comments that the problem is everyone is attacking each other but questions whether Joe can go around killing like that. But Joe explains that he's not killing anyone. Those people are no longer human. They've turned into zombies. Now all they want is blood. If you do nothing, you'll end up like those things. Huang angrily says that zombies don't exist and tells him to stop joking because this isn't a movie. He says Joe just killed Lao Zhang, and even his granddaughter hasn't returned from school, nor has his wife come back. He starts to wonder if Joe could be right. Ultimately, Huang worries and says that if this is true, they need to inform everyone right away. News suggests they call the police. Next to the village committee, but Joe replies that all of this would be meaningless. Then Linji appears and asks everyone to pay attention. He accuses Joe of being a murderer and questions what kind of method that is, saying Joe has killed dozens of people, and calling the police would be useless because this has crossed the line. The crowd starts to panic, with people shouting to catch the murderer, which in this case is Joe. Linji says he's using the zombie excuse just to justify the murders, and even mocks him, asking if he's now going to claim he has superpowers, while Bing tries to defend Joe and shouts. Telling everyone to be quiet, she explains that in reality, Joe has saved all of them, saying it was the villagers who had completely lost control and were attacking each other. Everyone saw it happen. Joe thanks Bing but says that's enough. He claims he can prove to everyone that those things are indeed zombies, and says he bets some members of those people's families have gone missing, right? Joe then says anyone who wants to know if they're real zombies should just step up like Linji, who was very assertive, full of doubt and accusations. He directly asks if he doesn't want to check for himself. She wants to know if he has the courage to do so. Linji becomes suspicious, thinking this Joe is very strange. After all, that morning, he sold all his livestock and went to buy a lot of resources, even stockpiling gunpowder. And now, at night, all of this is happening, but in Lin's mind, no matter what that crazy guy knows, he is dangerous and must die. Then Joe continues, saying many people have gone missing in the village, and there's a completely inaccessible place nearby. Just a forest behind the village. He asks if Lin still insists that the things he killed are not zombies, and says if that's the case, he should go and check for himself. He wants to know if Lin is scared. Lin Ji replied that he was an ordinary person. Of course, he was scared, especially with a murderer like him, but for the sake of the village. He agreed to go along to search for the missing people, saying that he would go but would take reliable people with him, and asked if Zhou would mind. Lin Ji thought that this way sooner or later he would get Zhou to open up and reveal all his secrets. Bing said she would also go. Nu tried to stop her, saying it was too dangerous for her. Huang commented that actually no one there really knew what was going on, but Bing explained that now they had to take care of the village since both the committee and the secretary were absent. They had to shoulder this responsibility. Then Zhou asked if the village secretary was really not there and wanted to know where he had gone. Bing said that in the afternoon, he had been very worried about the disappearances and decided to go alone to try to find them. But so far, he had not returned. Huang said that his wife had also gone missing and he had not heard anything from her. Zhou began to imagine that he had an idea of what might have happened. Hang said he would also go along to check everything out. Huang agreed with them, saying that Bing was right. Since the secretary was not there, they couldn't just stand by and do nothing. And furthermore, Zhou himself had to show what was happening. As a village official, they needed to understand the whole situation. Finally, Nu agreed, but said he would go in a private vehicle and ask them to wait for him. When they finally arrived at the scene, they discovered an abandoned vehicle and realized it was the village secretary's car. Nu analyzed the engine and commented that it was almost cold, indicating he had left the car a while ago. Huang said he had tried calling him, but the phone didn't ring while Zhou was deep in thought. Remembering that in his past life, the first horde of zombies appeared exactly 3 days later, he distinctly recalled that horde came from this very place. At that time, there were not enough personnel to investigate the source of the problem if everything happened just like before. It would be ineffective before the situation worsened. He had to personally eliminate the horde of zombies before it grew, and most importantly, if he could do that, he could earn Bing's trust once and for all. Zhou confirmed to everyone that they were in the right place and ordered them to move forward, but very carefully because that was the only thing they could do at this moment. Lin Ji was at the back. His gang just stood by observing and suspicious. Then, while they were still searching for the secretary, Bing remarked that the forest was too vast, and that he could only see 2 footprints ahead. Zhou analyzed the ground and said they had definitely passed through there. There were fresh footprints, broken branches, torn leaves, and even bloodstains scattered around. He explained that people had gone through there not long ago. Deep down, Zhou knew this was a typical sign of the zombie apocalypse when the undead gathered in large numbers. This kind of trace always appeared. After all, this was the first day of the zombie mutation disaster. Soon, they arrived at a cave. Zhou ordered everyone to stop and warned that it would be dangerous, and if too many people went inside. He said he would go ahead alone to assess the situation. Lin Jie wondered if he was sure about that, and then hinted that if there was a crime scene, he might just want to destroy the evidence. The group fell completely silent, and of course, everyone was tense about it. Zhou angrily replied that Lin Jie was the biggest coward he had ever met. He said if he had that much courage, he could definitely go into that cave alone, and if he wanted, he could even follow him. Lin Jie was startled, wondering if Zhou was really planning to kill him. At that moment, he became even more suspicious, thinking that this kid was really hiding a big secret in that cave. Just then, a zombie emerged from inside the cave, and attacking back was a woman who had completely transformed. Huang immediately recognized her face. It was his wife, in despair. He asked why she was there. He said he had been so worried looking for her, but Zhou immediately ordered him not to get any closer. Just as she tried to bite him, Zhou blocked her attack with a knife. He then clarified that this was no longer the woman he knew, and without hesitation, he chopped her head in half. Of course, this left Huang in a complete state of shock, unable to believe what had just happened. He screamed that Zhou would have to pay for killing his wife. He picked up a stick, took aim, and prepared to attack him while the rest of the group watched. The tense scene, Lin Ji even felt excited about it as if he was enjoying the chaos without thinking too much. Huang charged in but was completely overwhelmed. Zhou slapped him across the face, knocking him down like a pile of trash. Then Zhou said he had the right to be angry, to hate him, even to regret everything. But the fact that she was a zombie didn't change that he had to kill her. He said he just wanted to protect the living. Huang was completely consumed by rage and pain, retorting that it was all meaningless. He said that the woman Zhou had killed was his wife, and asked Zhou what he would do if someone killed his entire family right in front of him. At that moment, Zhou recalled the scene from his past life. When he saw his whole family dead, he was silent for a moment, processing it, then looked directly at Huang, asking him if he really dared to do it again, and without a second thought, he grabbed Huang's neck with extraordinary strength. With a cold gaze and completely consumed by rage, Zhou said she had been very good to him. He remembered being there in that hellish place, because they had accused him of being a murderer. Yet he had saved them twice, and this was how they repaid him. Zhou firmly stated that if anyone dared to touch his family, he would kill them without hesitation. Some tried to stop him, but Lin Ji stood by saying he always knew Zhou was a crazy killer until another person appeared to stop him. That's Joe's younger brother, who approached without hesitation, while Joe seemed to be in a trance and didn't hear him coming. Not wasting any time, his brother slammed his head into him with great force. Huang was saved by this hit, and Joe woke up, confused and asking what his brother was doing there as he fell. His brother replied that Joe finally snapped out of the trance. He said he was there because he was really worried since Joe had been gone too long. Huang Fallen started to cry, saying it was all his fault. He couldn't protect his wife. Joe's brother stepped closer, reaching out his hand. He told him that acting like this wouldn't bring her back, saying that his brother did the right thing by saving everyone there. Even though he understood Huang's loss, he said if they were going to hate someone, they should hate him. But now they had to face reality. As a village official, Huang was still needed. Huang clenched his hand and said yes, there were still people who could be saved. Meanwhile, Joe thought about how his brother was still the same, sharp and kind as ever. Their personalities were completely opposite. His brother had always been the favorite in the village, everyone's friend, but no matter what happened, he always protected him. Joe gently patted his brother's shoulder and said it was nothing, deep down thinking that this time he would be the one to protect his brother. Then they all heard a voice coming from the cave. Someone was calling for help, immediately recognizing it as the voice of the village secretary. But Joe stopped her, saying something strange was happening there. Soon, they began to hear a lot of screaming coming from inside the cave. One of the men looked at Lindsay and asked if he still believed that zombies didn't exist because he was starting to believe in them himself. Still, Lindsay insisted that zombies were just a movie thing when a huge muscular man stepped up. He said he would lead the way, shouting for whoever was in there to come out, but was violently pulled out and killed immediately after. His body was thrown outside, but not intact. Only half of it fell to the ground as a horde of zombies emerged from the darkness. Dozens of them piled up at the cave entrance. The zombies had torn the man's body in half, throwing the remains as if it were a toy, causing panic among everyone, including Lin Ji, who until that point had been brave. The zombies advanced at an absurd speed. Joe realized there were more than he expected. Even if they escaped, people would die. He shouted for everyone to stay close to him. But his brother rushed ahead, punching the zombies as if he was training, wondering if Joe really thought he would become a hero. Alone like that, even after being hit, some zombies could still get back up, impressing Joe's brother. And he asked if those things had any weaknesses. Joe explained that their only weakness was the brain in the sunlight. He also said his brother was not behind. He replied that of course, he always had to be ready to deal with his own brother. Joe asked if they would use the same strategy as before. And Bing, observing everything, was impressed by their coordination. Big brother Joe confirmed they would. He would attack first and his brother would follow. As the zombies roared and charged in, the two of them counterattacked first. Big brother Joe lunged forward with punches, taking down everyone in front of him, and Joe finished off the zombies with his knife. Decapitating anyone who dared to stand in the battle, Joe shouted for everyone still standing. Using the flashlight on the zombies and aiming for their heads, he also warned them not to get bitten in any way. Meanwhile, Hang and Nu were also getting used to their tasks, and they finally defeated 3 zombies that were solely dedicated to attacking them. Huang tiredly commented that handling it alone was exhausting, wondering how the Joe brothers made it look so easy. Nu explained that those 2 were disciples of Master Jiang in martial arts, and even a professional would find it difficult to face these 2. Aang said that looking back now, it was good they stopped him when he tried to hit Joe, because otherwise, he would have been beaten to a pulp. At that moment, the last zombie of the horde fell to the ground. Big brother Joe gasped, looking at him and asking when he had become so strong. Joe said he could teach her, but only if she asked nicely. He also told Bing not to be scared, but she was still frightened. Her brother commented that he didn't know how to comfort others at all, and Bing was very grateful for what they did. But her brother said it was Joe who did everything and she should thank him directly. Joe replied that he would check on the others. At that time, one of Lin Ji's subordinates had been bitten. In fact, there were several people screaming for help, calling the boss's name, but the boss was Lin. He was the one running away, hiding behind a tree while listening to all his men dying. At that moment, Joe appeared, saying that Lin was lucky he hadn't been infected, and told him he could keep hiding there, but not to make any noise. Lin was terrified, thinking that the bastard could kill him after the cave they were investigating. Because they heard the village secretary's voice there, someone was actually still alive inside, calling for help and realizing immediately, saying that it was definitely his voice. Joe told everyone to step back because he and his brother would go check it out. He also told Huang Bin and the newcomers that they should leave the area. Joe explained that rescuing people surrounded by zombies was very dangerous, and during the fight, they wouldn't be very effective and could become a burden. He said the best thing they could do now was head back to the village. Warning those who had not been alerted and getting ready, the newcomers agreed, saying they were right because others in the village needed them. Even so, Bing didn't want to just turn her back on them. Joe thought he couldn't let anyone else die. He needed to resolve first. At the source of the large zombie horde about to appear, he decided to leave the survivors for Bing to take care of, then went into the cave. Joe's brother asked him if he was sure the secretary was really there since a whole horde of zombies had appeared from that cave. Joe replied that he wasn't actually sure. He said that if the secretary had been bitten, there would be no way to save her. But luckily, that voice didn't sound like an infected person, and his brother hoped it was the case, saying that Bing had come to work as a village staff member. In her first year at university, the village secretary was the one who helped her adapt to life there. That's why she was worried about him. Suddenly, Joe heard a noise and ordered them to stop. They then encountered a corpse with a large hole in its chest. Joe found this very strange because it was different from the other zombies. It hadn't transformed yet and was just an ordinary corpse, and he wondered what could have caused the hole. At that moment, Joe's brother noticed someone behind and wondered if it was the secretary. He shined his flashlight on the person who was calling for help, but it wasn't a person, it was a zombie. Joe immediately recognized it as a mutated zombie and easily threw it away. When the monster tried to attack again, it was obscured by the light from Joe's brother's flashlight, who shouted that they had to run. Later, in the woods, Joe's brother asked what kind of zombie that was. Joe explained that it was still a zombie but a mutation. Suddenly, many bats flew out of the cave like a large swarm fleeing from the same thing. The tentacles of that mutated zombie hit Joe's brother very hard. It broke his flashlight, but he didn't let it go. When the zombie tried to bite him, he pulled the tentacle off but realized that thing was very strong, and they needed light urgently. Then a light appeared at the end of the tunnel, a vehicle came rushing in at high speed, and the driver was Bing. She simply rammed into the mutated zombie, smashing it against a tree to finish the job. Joe ran to the monster and stabbed it in the head with a knife while being asked if they were okay and who that monster was. Then she realized it was the secretary. At that moment, Joe's brother apologized and said they could only rely on their family now. Joe wondered why this was happening again. He had been reborn to prevent this tragedy, but he still couldn't protect his brother. He recalled the mutant and wasted no time. He grabbed the knife and began stabbing the zombie's body. His brother asked what he was doing, and Bing was also very worried about that. Joe knew that mutated zombies gathered low-level zombies to absorb the zombie virus into their bodies. Their purpose was to protect the zombie core. That core was deep in the head. Joe then explained to his brother that there was still a chance that core had the same origin as the virus currently in his body. If he ate it, there was a small chance he would evolve into someone with immunity to the zombie virus skills. But there was also a big chance he would turn into a monster like the one they just faced. Without hesitation, Joe's brother simply swallowed the core and said he should have said it sooner. He asked how long it would take, and Joe replied it would take 2 days. Then, the younger brother said that if they didn't get out of that cave in 2 days, he would have to seal it up, and if he happened to become a skill user, he shouldn't make Joe jealous. Joe agreed, saying he would wait while Lynn was hiding and watching everything, listening to the entire conversation and thinking she could take advantage of this information. The next morning, when Joe woke up, his dad had gone to work, and Bing even tried to help, but she wasn't really useful. Joe's dad asked him where he got all this good stuff, and Joe explained it was gunpowder, no joke. Even so, his dad said he would get him a small barrel. At that moment, Bing couldn't help at all. In fact, she was getting hit while trying to be useful. Joe thought that after all, like mother like son, Joe asked if there was any breakfast left, but his mom said she was busy, and if he wanted to eat, he could make it himself. Joe then thought about going to his uncle's house to get some food, but before he could leave, someone was about to ring the bell, but Joe opened the door right then and asked why she was there. Bing replied that it might seem a bit weird, especially after what happened yesterday, but she wanted Joe to come with her to the city, to try to contact the outside world. Joe and his mom stayed silent. He felt a bit uncomfortable, but Bing continued anyway. She said she felt really bad about what happened to his brother the day before. She only realized they had done something dangerous because of her after everything happened. Still, she said Joe was the strongest person she knew, and for the sake of the town, she needed to understand the situation better. She said she was willing to do anything. She didn't care if Joe and his family hated her. She just wanted his help so they could protect the town. Joe's mom interrupted, saying that was enough. She said if her son hadn't come home yesterday, it would have been Bing's fault, but thinking back, she knew that even without her, Joe would have done the same, so Joe agreed, and his mom even handed him a very sharp knife. Then, as they were getting ready to leave, his mom told them to do what they needed to do, and then come back. They would go on one foot and return on the other. Bing replied that they would be back soon, and Joe asked his mom to secure that door because they needed to be safe. Joe's mom commented that the two of them seemed like a nice couple. While inside the cave, Joe's younger brother was undergoing a transformation. He wondered if Joe would come back because he heard someone else's footsteps. Right at that moment, he noticed a liquid seeping through the cave floor, and upon closer inspection, he saw it was gasoline. Before he could react, a massive explosion occurred, destroying everything inside the cave. Meanwhile, Joe and Bing were driving into town. A country song was playing on the radio and Bing was singing along. Joe thought she was the kind of person who didn't understand her own voice. Realizing this, Bing apologized and explained that when she was really nervous, she often sang a song, but she didn't know if she sang well or not. Joe thought that even though she was afraid of death, Bing still wanted to fulfill her duty to the village. He also thought that surely, she is the person you met in your past life, but in this life, there are many possibilities, and you can't just cling to past experiences. Joe knows that Bing hasn't been trained well to deal with zombies, but he can't let anything happen to her. At that moment, he says if she wants, she can live with him in the future. Bing shyly asks if he wants her to move in with him. Joe tries to explain but thinks he can't just tell her that he awakens supernatural powers or that she might have in a past life. She would never believe that. So, he would have to explain everything very carefully. Joe simply says that he needs her and can't let anything bad happen to her, which makes her blush, thinking it's a love confession. But suddenly, they're shocked by what they see on the road. It's completely blocked as if a massive landslide has covered everything. Bing comments that they won't be able to reach the city that way. Joe thinks that in the past life, that road was open, and he realizes that many things have changed. Since he traveled back in time, if that road is impassable, it will also be very difficult to transport goods in the future. Joe says it's best they go back to the village and decide what to do. On the way back, he thinks the supplies he has at home will last for a while, but not forever. With no signal and no access to the city, he starts to feel really bad about the whole situation. Then suddenly, the vehicle falls into a trap that punctures a tire. The car skids, but Joe manages to brake just in time. Bing is very scared, but Joe knows what's happening. Someone set this trap on purpose. At that moment, Lin appears, saying that Joe is actually quick to understand. He is holding a gun, and he says he is jealous of their sense of justice for the village. Joe is furious, wondering what that bastard wants. Lin explains that Joe killed many of his brothers the night before, and as the older brother, he needs to take revenge for them. Joe responds that if he wants to avenge his brothers, he should kill zombies, not him. But from what he saw the night before, Lin doesn't seem good at dealing with zombies or anything else. Lin says he will kill Joe right there. Joe asks if he's sure. After a moment of silence, Lin simply shoots, but not at Joe. He shoots Bing in the leg. At that moment, Joe says now he's dead. Lin mocks him, asking if he's angry, saying that to take someone down, the best way is to start by attacking those around them. Lin then comments that he forgot to tell Joe one thing. He says he heard Joe's brother last night. With nothing else to do, he helps himself by blowing up the hole where Joe's brother is hiding. This makes Joe so angry that he chases after Lin with a knife. Bing, even injured, is very worried. Lin laughs, saying Joe is a fool and just waiting for this. The only thing Lin doesn't realize is that there's a creature right next to him. A giant wolf appears, and with one bite, it tears off Lin's arm. Joe immediately realized that this was a high-level zombie wolf. Meanwhile, Mei was at home completely bored. She told herself that her brother was late, and wondered why they hadn't come back. At that moment, Huang and Nu knocked on the door to see if Joe was there. Mei replied that he was out and wanted to know why. Huang then asked her to check the horizon using the zoom function on her phone. Mei was completely shocked to see a massive horde of zombies approaching at that moment. Lin was about to die, but still, he thought that at least Joe wouldn't survive that situation. The zombie wolf quickly realized that Joe was a significant threat, and charged straight at him. But Joe managed to counterattack, slicing through the zombie wolf's chest and belly with ease. He thought that at least it was still light out and the wolf wasn't that strong. If it were nighttime, everyone there would definitely be dead. Joe knew he had to kill that wolf before sunset. At that moment, he started to hear the screams of zombies. The entire horde was advancing. Joe was confused, wondering why this was happening. In his mind, the village secretary, who was the source of the horde of zombies, was already dead, so why were the zombies still appearing? Thinking it over, Joe realized that perhaps the true source of the zombie horde wasn't the secretary but the bat that had infected everyone. While he was pondering, the zombie wolf attacked him again, and Joe realized this was not a good sign. Upon closer inspection, he saw that the wounds he inflicted on the wolf had completely healed. The wolf's recovery was absurd, and it was ready to devour him. But just then, something happened in the cave covered by rocks after the explosion. A person emerged. It was Joe's brother, who now seemed to have become a skilled user. At that moment, Bing was completely desperate, because the wolf had bitten Joe's head off, but inside the wolf's mouth. Joe sensed a strange source of energy. He recognized that feeling and with a lethal strike pierced through the wolf's head. He stabbed it multiple times with extreme frenzy. Bing didn't even know what was happening right before her eyes. Joe had chopped the zombie wolf to pieces. Eliminating that creature once and for all, Joe told Bing that everything was okay, that it was safe here, at least for now. Bing was still panting, relieved that he was okay. She said that of course she was worried, but at the same time, she wasn't too surprised since she expected he would get through it. Joe commented that he didn't know exactly why, but his strength had increased significantly. He wondered if he had awakened some kind of physical power. In his previous life, he had never heard of anyone awakening without swallowing a zombie's soul pill. Joe then said it wasn't the time to talk. Because they had to run, they were surrounded by zombies. Soon after, the horde of zombies appeared on the road. Joe looked at Bing, saw she was injured, and said he would carry her. He told her to hold on tight because the journey would be very bumpy. At sunset, the zombies were chasing Joe. The person is running very fast. Bing clinging tightly to his back. With his greatly improved physical abilities, he can leap over the trees. He sees the distance to the village from afar, but he realizes there are still many zombies behind them. Joe thinks that even if he stops to kill them all, he can't ensure Bing's safety. When suddenly the zombies are hit by a large explosion, a vehicle appears on the road. Bombs are scattered everywhere, and as the vehicle stops, Joe realizes it's his father and May. They quickly get in the vehicle, fleeing from the horde of zombies. Joe's father says this is the family's specialty. May excitedly starts throwing Molotov cocktails at the zombies, blowing them all up, but when one of the zombies gets close, even though it's on fire, Joe's father says he will give him another gift. He throws another bomb along with his cigarette, creating an explosion so strong that the vehicle is thrown forward several meters. May cheers that it's so much fun. In the chaos, Joe remembers something under the seat. There's a secret compartment. He opens it and indeed finds a suitcase full of everything he needs, with medicine, bandages, and other essential supplies. May tells them to pass it to her, and then asks if Joe really thinks he can just touch a girl's leg like that, or if they have some special relationship. Of course, Bing is very shy about that comment. Joe responds by calling May a brat and then asks his father how things are in the village. His father replies that everything is under control, that the zombies haven't made it there yet. Joe then asks if his father has made a lot of explosives. His father replies that of course he has. When he was young, he was completely obsessed with explosions and learned about it every day. He says that when working in the mine, he was an expert in explosives and that once he had extracted all the ore, unfortunately, he could no longer use explosives. He comments that he even thought about playing some games at home after getting married, but his wife wouldn't allow it. Joe then asks if the explosion in the kitchen last year was his fault. His father replies that of course not, while trembling. Joe suspects, asks why he is shaking, and his father reminds him not to tell their mother later. At home, they hear a scream coming from inside. The door is locked and no one can open it, so Joe just kicks it. Once inside, they see Joe's mother holding a zombie by the neck. She comments that it's been a long time since she saw that little girl. Everyone is very impressed by what they see. Joe's mother doesn't blink, grabs a frying pan and starts smashing the zombie. Clearly, before becoming a zombie, that little girl owed her money. The zombie is beaten to a pulp with the frying pan. Joe wonders when his mother became so strong, and his father replies that back in the day, she used to be a tough guy. He says that even 3 armed thugs wouldn't be enough to deal with her. He adds that when they met and got married, she calmed down a bit. The truth is, she forced the marriage. As he was saying this, he got hit by his wife with a frying pan. She called him an idiot, saying he was the one who always begged them to get married. Then she looked at Joe and asked why her son broke the door. She said there would be a lesson after this. Joe tried to explain, when Bing interrupted, asking her not to blame him because he was just worried. Mom looked at Bing and asked if he was coming back too. She said she was just joking, because actually, she was very good to her kids. But the cheerful mood didn't last long as another zombie appeared, trying to climb over the wall. Huang immediately stopped the race and warned them to stop talking because many zombies were coming. They were taking care of the east side. At that moment, Joe activated his assassin mode. With a rain of blood, he began tearing the heads off the zombies without stopping. He thought that in his past life, this horde of zombies suddenly appeared and no one was prepared, but now with his family all alive and reunited, they were exterminating the zombie breed. He realized he was no longer alone, and his family was truly amazing. Together, they would survive. The zombies began to notice that many of them were dead, but since they were zombies, they didn't back down. Still, when facing the zombies, Joe managed to make them look like they were scared. May commented that the horde of zombies was even scared, but Joe replied that it wasn't that zombies didn't know fear. In reality, what was happening was that the zombies had retreated to arm themselves. They began picking up hoes, shovels, ladders, and other tools. Joe's dad was very shocked, asking if the zombies now knew how to use weapons. Joe stared at the scene and replied that no, zombies didn't have the intelligence to do that. This could only mean one thing: they were being controlled by someone, until he spotted something on the horizon. Joe saw a mutated zombie. It was Lin, who somehow survived and transformed even with the explosive blasts set by the Xiao family. The zombies continued their relentless attack. Joe's dad realized they were heading straight for their house and urged them to get the explosives. But when told that everything had been used, some zombies began using makeshift ladders to climb over the house wall. And Joe wondered if zombies were capable of using such tactics. Meanwhile, Bing, who was injured, was surrounded by zombies. Not just her, but everyone was exhausted after the fight. Joe then said they just needed to focus on defending the back of the house because he would handle everything else. Without hesitation, he charged towards the horde of zombies. His dad shouted in worry. But when the zombies tried to rush at him, Joe quickly dealt with them, slicing them in half effortlessly. He realized he was activating a skill, which was a blood energy shield, a skill called asterisk, blood of the Buddha asterisk. Joe thought he had only seen this ability once in his past life when the military commander known as Greed used it. He was the strongest person Joe had ever met. Unlike that commander, Joe realizes that this version of his skill is weaker, but that's okay. If it's enough to protect his family, then that's all that matters. He understands that just living isn't really the threat. The real issue is the leader. If he kills the leader, everything will end, so he looks straight at Lin. The Day is on top of a building, observing everything, while Joe is also surrounded by zombies. Realizing the situation, he wonders if Lin really thinks he can stop him with just ordinary zombies. But suddenly, he realizes there's a very different, stronger zombie lurking right behind him, while the staff is trying their best to handle the situation. But everyone is very tired. Bing, although injured, can't stop worrying about Joe and asks where he is. Mei replies that she knows because she saw her brother killing zombies like a superhero, saying he'll be fine. But in the next moment, the wall of the house is broken. Joe is thrown into the house, violently tossed by something. But in the next moment, the wall of the house has been broken. Joe is violently tossed into the house by something. Joe looks ahead and sees what did that. It's a giant zombie bear. At that moment, he thinks he can't let that happen again. He can't let people die there, so he channels even more power, to the point that even his family feels the pressure. Affected by his presence, the zombie bear sees him as a real threat, and they both charge at each other. But before their punches collide, someone stops the bear's attack. Joe is surprised to see that it's his own brother. Now looking much stronger, Joe's brother says he doesn't even know how, but has activated that kind of power. Joe's older brother says he's late to the party. Joe breathes a sigh of relief and asks if he's okay. His brother replies that he took some time to get used to this new power. And he showed Joe how to use it. He unleashed a blow so strong that it sent the zombie bear flying through several houses. Then he looks at it and asks if it's dead, saying that this giant hamster will be tough to deal with. Nonetheless, he tells Joe that he knows what to do. He'll hold the big one, while Joe takes care of the rest. Joe confirms that he'll follow the orders, and a moment later he faces Lin. In that moment, he thinks about his greatest nightmares, the things that kept him from sleeping in the past. He has always feared being weak, unable to protect those he loves, but now, with this power in his life, he won't let that happen again. He thinks that any threat in his way, he will crush without hesitation. Lin looks at him and says that the old Lin is dead, now he's a new creature. He says he has given up the weak human body he once had and is now much stronger, with Lin saying that now he's half zombie and half human. He retained his consciousness and could control the entire horde of zombies, proclaiming himself the king of this apocalypse, and for that, he thanked Joe a lot for killing that wolf. And making a fool of him, it was thanks to Joe that he survived by eating the wolf's crystal, so he said he would repay the favor. His final decision was to kill Joe, but the first to go had to be Joe himself, who had split Lin in half and said he was too noisy. He wondered what kind of king a weakling like this was. Joe thought that now Lin was dead, this horde of zombies would soon come to an end. But surprisingly, Lin stood up even though he had been cut in half. His body had completely regenerated, and Lin said that Joe's sword couldn't kill him. Joe then realized that Lin had obtained the regeneration ability of that wolf. Lin stated that now they were of the same kind, and he declared that this apocalypse was his, and everyone must kneel before him. He said that the zombies would be his army and the humans would be the source for survival. Lin also revealed that he had created that horde of zombies, specifically to eliminate Joe's family because he knew they were obstructing his plans. He said they could conquer this world together, and even asked if Joe liked the gift, while Joe's family was holding the walls of their home. The news said it wouldn't hold for long, but the elder replied that it would only last a short while. He said soon Xiao and Joe would appear to end that horde of zombies, and he was right. In the next moment, the body of the zombie bear fell right beside them. Xiao appeared and said that this guy was very hard to deal with, but he managed to handle it. Lao asked how things were going on Joe's side. Xiao didn't really know, but saw that there were still many zombies left. He thought it was better to stand guard to protect the family. He told Joe's father not to worry because Joe had much more potential than him. He said that his younger brother would handle it. But at that moment, Joe was getting beaten up by Lin. Lin expressed his disappointment and asked if he was that weak, saying if Joe joined him, he would still spare Joe, but of course, Joe wouldn't listen. The cut from his blade was so powerful, it destroyed half the building, and he made it clear that humans could not cooperate with monsters, especially one who dared to attack his family. The only thing he would do was kill him. Lin replied that it was a pity even though he was almost split in two. He was recovering from Joe's strike. He said that his punishment would be the death penalty and lunged at him with his claws. But Joe blocked with his knife. Only this time he noticed that Lin was much faster. Not just faster, but also stronger. Lin made a deep cut on Joe's skin. Even standing up, it was exhausting him too much. Joe began to wonder if the protection of the Buddha's blood could block such attacks. Lin laughed and said that Joe wasn't bad at all since he hadn't died from his strongest blow. He said he thought he would soon see the colors of Joe's intestines scattered all over the ground. Meanwhile, Joe thinks his energy is depleting too quickly. He knows if this continues, he won't be able to keep the Buddha's blood active anymore. Therefore, he understands that the next attack will decide who wins the fight, but Lin is right behind him. With a precise strike, he creates a cut straight down the middle of Joe's body. Lin says that he actually doesn't know what his strongest move is. So he lied earlier, but Joe, even in that state, reacted quickly and threw a bomb right at Lin's face. Lin laughs and asks if he thinks he can kill him with that firecracker. Until he realizes that Joe actually used it as a distraction to escape, he looks around and wonders if that brave guy really ran away from him, but then he tells himself that Joe will never escape, not with the smell of blood he's carrying. Lin says that when he finds Joe, he will torture him to death, while Joe is hiding in a shop. He thinks that at least he managed to stop the bleeding, but he doesn't know that the Buddha's blood has healing capabilities. Still, his energy is nearly depleted, and he has just one more chance. As Lin approaches, he realizes that Joe is in a gas station and says that Joe didn't pick his coffin very well. He asks if Joe knows why wolves hunt even when they have food reserves. It's because they enjoy the feeling of fear. They love to induce despair in their prey, and they enjoy watching the prey try every trick to survive, even when they know it's always futile. Lin then pulls a car out and realizes Joe isn't there. He follows the trail of blood and sees gasoline spilled on the ground, a path, and a prepared Molotov cocktail. Lin asks if Joe really thinks he's dumb enough to fall into such a trap. He says the smell of blood is stronger over there. So he smashed the roof of the gas station thinking Joe was there, but only found his jacket covered in blood. At that moment, Joe actually appears from behind the jacket and throws something straight at Lin's face, causing him to scream immediately. Feeling his skin burning, Lin wonders what the hell that was, and Joe replies that it's salt, asking Lin if he can't smell it or even see it. Joe explains that the wolf's core makes Lin's senses much sharper, but also becomes his weakness. He says that a wolf has over 200 million cells, distributed throughout the nose with the ability to distinguish over 2 million different smells, and this fact, while seeming like an advantage, becomes a problem because it can't tolerate irritants in the nasal cavity, making everything much more painful. Joe also says that usually when a person sees a trap, they often let their guard down thinking they're safe, and Lin is no different. Lin, angry, tries to hit Joe, but Joe easily dodges, thinking Lin won't have a chance to kill him. Joe decides to do exactly what he saw his brother Xiao demonstrate. He gathers all the energy from the Buddha's blood into one hand and says that now it will be Lin's end. With a cross-shaped punch, he landed a solid hit on Lin, and after that, Joe realized he was really tough because even that attack couldn't kill him. Lin was completely buried in the ground with the mark of the strike, still saying he was king, but right after that, his body was completely covered in gasoline. Unable to escape the hole, he started gulping down a lot of gasoline, and Joe explained that of course, a simple Molotov cocktail couldn't burn someone like Lin, so he threw him straight into the underground tank of the gas station, saying this way he could send him straight to hell. And that was a very fitting coffin for him. At that moment, at the prison, they heard an explosion, and Xiao asked if everything was okay. Lao said yes, but noticed something. The sun was starting to rise, and they might also notice that the zombies were retreating. The horde of zombies feared the sunlight, even though they were very tired. Everyone was very happy that it was finally over. They succeeded in protecting the house, and Joe, who was approaching the house, felt very proud of his people until he heard a voice calling for help. Someone was pleading to be saved. It was Aline, Joe's ex-girlfriend, who fainted after calling out to him. Then May asked if her brother was a pervert for undressing a woman in the middle of the street, and Joe replied that it wasn't like that. He just wanted to check if she had been bitten. The risk of bringing an infected woman into the house was much greater than just undressing her. They needed to be very careful. Joe commented that he wasn't wearing a shirt either. So it seemed fair for May to respond that this only made him look even more perverted. She said she was lucky to have seen that scene in time, because otherwise it would have been really bad if Bing saw that. Joe asked what Bing had to do with this, but she quickly left the room, announcing that Lin Chin was okay. Maybe just very mentally and physically exhausted, with no strength left, but she would wake up after a nice rest. Bing noticed the strange atmosphere in the room and asked what it was. May shrugged, saying it was nothing and felt relieved to hear Lin Chin was okay. Joe thanked Bing for her good work. Bing replied that it wasn't a big deal because they were the ones who worked harder than she did. Then Huang announced that they needed to leave first, to check if there were any other survivors in the village, since that was their duty as staff here. Before leaving, Joe called her back, and told her not to blame herself for what happened to the others because a horde of zombies was not something that could be easily controlled. He explained that it would never be possible to save everyone, and the most important thing was to ensure the survivors stayed alive. Bing agreed, saying that was true. Xiao commented that finally, his brother had grown up. Joe replied that this time, things would end differently. Xiao was curious and asked what he was talking about, but Joe refused, saying it was better not to ask. Joe then ordered them to leave by truck because they needed to handle the corpses. Later, in the forest, they burned all the corpses inside the cave. When they finished burning the last batch of zombies, Joe commented that they also needed to burn the corpses of the mutants, because if not, animals might eat those corpses and eventually transform as well. Xiao said that he just wanted to go back and have a good sleep now, but he warned that Joe would drive and that they would have to stop at a gas station. Joe asked about the gas station, but felt confused and wanted to know why he had to wash the car. Xiao replied that it was because he was the oldest. He was in charge. Joe asked if he was sure he was the strongest and if he wanted to bet. Saying that he was never afraid of him, they decided to settle the dispute with a game of rock, paper, scissors. But depending on luck, they needed another method. The rules were very simple. One of them would stand still and count to 10, while the other would use that time to run as far as possible. Then, the hunter would have 3 minutes to catch the runner. If he caught him, he wins. If not, the runner would be the winner. Joe used his skills to run and quickly distance himself as the 10 seconds passed. The runner would be the winner. Joe had used his skills to run and escape quickly as the 10 seconds passed. Xiao had chased after him, saying that he knew that trick too. Joe had managed to dodge the first attack, and the two began a fast-paced chase through the forest. Joe jumped from branch to branch, but Xiao spotted a gap and punched down a large tree, causing the branch Joe intended to use to vanish. He also threw a large log at his brother, who tried to hold onto it with all his strength. The contest then turned into a test of strength. Joe wondered if he should run, but deep down he knew that his brother was physically stronger. Joe was thrown against a wall, but with too much pressure, his body simply burst into pieces. Joe wondered if he had become too heavy, but realizing that Joe had disappeared, just then a pebble fell on Xiao's head, and Joe appeared saying that 3 minutes had passed. So the runner won this time. Xiao asked in surprise when he had gotten up there. Joe replied that he was testing his strength and had finally discovered that he could do it. He realized he was gradually exploring his own abilities. Xiao commented that he got the ability after eating that crystal and asked if Joe had eaten one. Joe replied that maybe he had eaten one. He said that in this life, he didn't do that, but in his past life, he had eaten one of those crystals. After this contest, Joe understood that his ability was called borrowing strength. Basically, he could use Xiao's abilities. Joe knew that his ability was called ***, Blood Buddha ***, an effect that significantly enhances his physical attributes, especially strength and agility. Moreover, he could extend this ***, blood energy ***, to deal damage to anything that came close to his body. However, at this moment, he could only use 70% of this ability. Joe commented that he could also imagine all the numbers and data related to his abilities. He asked if he had one of the same systems as theirs, but Joe replied that it wasn't exactly like that. In fact, it's just a natural effect of his brain that can quantify data, but no numbers appear in front of him, as if it were a game. He explained that the average strength of an adult is about 20, while Xiao's strength and agility at that time were probably around 90. Xiao then asked if he could see the intelligence attribute, and Joe replied that it was definitely 0 because he was a complete idiot. Xiao heard this, got angry, and said that if he said anything more, he would beat him up. Then Xiao changed the subject, saying that he had left that bear crystal in the room, and if Joe figured out how to use it, he could use it. Joe replied that he really hoped he would never have to use that crystal, but admitted that you never know, so it could be a last resort. Not long after, Joe said he was going to wash the car, and he said he would help because he felt it wasn't fair to let a kid do it alone. The only thing is that while they were talking, someone was eavesdropping. That night, while Joe was sleeping, Mei sneaked into his room and stole the crystal, saying that now she would also have superpowers. The next morning, Joe was tilling the land, complaining about his bad luck having to do this work. His mom had said they needed to stock up on food, and to do that, farming was necessary. So, he had to prepare the land. Joe thought his brother wasn't doing anything, but in the end, he was the one sent out. So he decided to make the job easier by activating his Buddha blood and started preparing the land with his enhanced strength. Meanwhile, Linshin approached a bit shyly, but she didn't think it would be a problem. She asked if Joe was there, saying she was looking for him. As she got closer, she saw the whole scene of him working in the dirt. Joe asked her if she was okay. Linshin replied that of course she was fine thanks to him and said that he was her savior. Joe tried to be humble, saying it was nothing, he was just keeping his promise, yet Linshin insisted that he had saved her and offered her a drink. Asking if he would continue to help her in the future, Joe replied no, which surprised Linshin, and she asked what that meant. He had done all these things for a promise, because her father had helped his family a lot during tough times. Now he had done his part. He no longer had any obligations or responsibilities toward her. Linshin was disappointed but said she understood afterward. After he finally cleared all the dirt stuck on the walls, Joe told himself that he had never imagined that strength could be useful for something like this, but he knew he still needed to practice and learn how to control his abilities better. Then someone knocked on the door asking if anyone was home. When he answered, Joe saw Uncle Nu and Huang. After chatting, Joe explained that this was the current situation. There's no one left alive in the village. I'm sorry about this. But Joe said it's nobody's fault. He mentioned earlier that a horde of zombies isn't something that can be easily controlled, emphasizing that they all took great risks to protect the village. And they did everything they could. He also said they were all amazing. Nu then asked what they would do now. Joe replied that this part is quite simple. He said everyone could stay at his house, shower, rest, and have dinner with him. And above all, no matter what happens, they just need to survive. Then Bing came out of the bathroom commenting that Xiao Mei's shirt was a bit small for her and said she felt a bit weird. Not long after, Xiao Mei called Bing for dinner and said it was ready. Bing thought it wasn't a big deal and decided to go eat. At dinner time, everyone had gathered. Xiao Mei told Bing to sit right next to Xiao Shu, making Lin Qin feel uncomfortable. She didn't completely understand the situation, but she could see the giggles and exchanged glances, and she definitely didn't like it. Then Lao saw that everyone had gathered and the table was full of food. He stood up to speak. He said everyone there knew about the current situation, that they were the last survivors of the village, and even if they didn't know what the outside world was like, they had survived. He said that from now on they would continue to fight, they would work together and help each other. Protect each other and do their best not just to survive but to enjoy the life they fought so hard for. Then he proposed a toast. However, at that moment, Xiao Mei began to feel very uncomfortable. She fell weakly to the ground, feeling something strange flowing through her body. She was undergoing a transformation that she couldn't control. She lunged at Joe, trying to bite him, but Joe quickly defended himself with his blood Buddha aura. Everyone was terrified, asking what was happening to her. While Lam Thien witnessed in complete fear, suddenly that strange feeling disappeared. Joe asked her if she had regained her consciousness, and little by little, Xiao Mei seemed to return to normal, although she was quite worried and embarrassed about what she had just done. She didn't know where to hide her face, commenting that even her brother had to save her, and that was so embarrassing. At that moment, Ji simply punched her in the stomach to knock her out and said she must have drunk too much, so he would take her to bed. Meanwhile, Xiao Mei was vomiting in the middle of the road. Everyone was confused, not understanding what was happening. Then, when everything calmed down, Xiao Mei expressed her disappointment, saying that the whole thing was so humiliating. Joe explained that she knew exactly what had happened. She had eaten a core just like the others, and said that she was very lucky not to turn into a mutant. Xiao Mei apologized, saying she just wanted to have such a power. Joe thought that if she hadn't realized this in time, things could have ended much worse. Then, Joe said he would teach her how to use her power. He told her to close her eyes and focus, explained that power should be felt like air in the lungs, but in this case, it's flowing throughout the body. He says that this power is now a part of her instincts, and she should use it to sense the world around her. Joe asks her if she sees anything, and Xiao Mei replies that she does. She is seeing life. It's like she can perceive and even control the flow of life around her. Then she runs her hand over the prepared soil and immediately a plant sprouts and begins to grow. Xiao Mei asks in surprise if her power is to make the plants grow faster. Joe confirms, saying that, from the looks of it, it's one of her abilities. At that moment, Joe also uses the same power and makes a potato he planted that morning grow instantly, until it's ready for harvest. Xiao Mei is shocked and asks him how he did that, and Joe replies that with that, the food issue is officially solved, it's easy. However, Xiao Mei feels a bit disappointed. Wondering if her ability is just for farming, she thinks that she wants a cooler power like shooting lasers, summoning storms, or even turning into a magical girl, but in the end, she just becomes a farmer. Joe responds that she's overthinking it, and that she shouldn't underestimate this power. He also thinks that usually when consuming a zombie core, there's a very low chance for someone to gain abilities. But both Xiao and Xiao Mei managed to do it, which is impressive to say the least. Joe has a suspicion that it's not just luck happening to them, but perhaps it all comes down to their own skills. The next morning when the rooster crows, he tells it to be quiet and wonders where Nu got those chickens from, explaining that he had this hen at home and brought it back to start a farm. He says that many years ago, when the village farm was short on manpower, the village committee asked for temporary help. Before they left, they gifted his family a chicken, and they have taken care of it ever since. Joe thinks the farm isn't too far from his home, so they decided to head there. I will explain that the goal this time is to gather all the surviving livestock and, of course, bring back anything edible. But when they arrive, Huang notices many corpses scattered around, and wonders if they could turn into mutated zombies. Upon closer inspection, he realizes that those zombie corpses look like they were shot by someone. Joe tells them not to worry, saying they won't get up again as long as they avoid dark places, because the biggest weakness of zombies is sunlight. Huang comments that perhaps the situation outside is similar. Nu optimistically, replies that the big city certainly has high-tech weapons and they probably handled things much better, so sooner or later someone from the city will show up to save them. But Xiao is more realistic, responding that they shouldn't have too high expectations. He says that the scariest thing about a zombie apocalypse isn't the zombies or the virus, but the disaster the virus has caused to the world. Everything is different now, and the only thing they can rely on is themselves. After that, Nu found some fresh eggs and Xiao asked if they would hatch. Nu replied that, as long as the temperature and humidity are within the requirements, yes, they can hatch, while Wang found everything a bit strange, because he only saw the eggs and wondered where the livestock was. Nu remarked that maybe they had also died suddenly. Another creature appeared, a goose. Wang commented that at least they were lucky because some kind of livestock was still alive. He took the bag from Xiao and said he would pack the goose for a trip because he was good at that while he was tying up the goose. Huang explained that you should never pick up a goose directly by hand because they bite. Then he carefully tied the animal's wings and remarked that geese are usually hard to handle, but this one seemed pretty stupid. What they didn't know was that the goose was actually moving closer, intentionally, ready to rip Huang's head off. Luckily, Xiao reacted quickly and threw the goose away. Huang was startled. Asking what was going on, Xiao realized that something was very wrong and told everyone to run. However, just as they stepped outside, they realized they were surrounded by a horde of zombie geese, a real flock with huge beaks wide open, ready to devour everyone. Xiao quickly figured out a way for them to escape, but realized that both Nu and Huang were very tired. He could easily run and escape from the geese but couldn't leave them behind, so Xiao decided to use his second power. The power he had borrowed from Xiao Mei. He activated the growth ability and made many vines grow rapidly, entangling the geese, creating a living wall between them and the horde of monsters. Xiao warned that he had temporarily halted the mutations, but they needed to run fast. Only when they tried to run to the other side did they realize they were also surrounded there. Another horde of mutated geese was blocking the way. At this point, they were completely trapped. Xiao told everyone to quickly get into that building, and they did so. For the time being, it seemed to have worked. Nu remarked that they were now trapped inside. He said that Xiao might escape, but it would be difficult for him and Huang since the zombie geese were still down there. Xiao replied that it wasn't their fault for being trapped down there. He promised to get everyone home. He thought that maybe if he used all his strength to circulate the Buddha's blood, he could protect the two grown men. But he wasn't sure if that power would be enough to take out all those mutants if the energy ran out halfway. They would all die. He wondered if it was worth the risk. Meanwhile, Huang noticed that there was a computer running inside. The farm still had power and was connected to the system. But at that moment, they started banging on the door. Xiao anxiously told Huang to do what he was trying to do because that door wouldn't hold for long. Huang replied that he just needed 3 minutes to finish. He said if successful, he would take out those mutants. Xiao looked at the door and realized it wouldn't hold for 3 minutes, so he had no choice but to attack. He gripped the door tightly and began to smash a horde of zombie geese with it, then moved forward down the hallway. Using the door as both a shield and a weapon, he annihilated the geese in his path, turning them into minced meat, thinking this should buy him some time. To his surprise, he realized the chunks of meat that had been blasted off started to move, while Nu desperately asked what Huang was doing. He said Xiao was fighting outside, but it wouldn't last long. Huang was focused. He replied that this was the final step. As soon as he finished downloading, everything would be fine. Outside, Xiao's situation was getting worse. All the destroyed flesh had gathered to form a massive mutated creature, even as he defended himself with the door. He couldn't withstand the impact of the next blow. Even the power of the Buddha's blood seemed to have no chance against that thing. Finally, he rolled on the floor, along with the door, being dragged away by the force of the attack. Witnessing this scene, Nu yelled for Xiao to take Huang and run, or they would all die. But Xiao, despite being injured, replied that he wouldn't abandon anyone. He promised to take everyone with him no matter what happened. As the creature advanced again, Xiao did something desperate. He used both powers at once. Inside him, the two forces began to collide, creating a strange sensation as if his body was about to be torn apart from the inside. But at the same time, he felt pure power being generated, then focused all this energy into a single strike. Combining the two powers together, this strike was so powerful that it simply turned that flesh monster into dust. With teeth flying everywhere, Xiao was left with a totally mangled arm, barely able to move as he looked around. Wondering if it was really over, he questioned what kind of skill he had used since he had never felt anything like this before. But he realized he had expended too much energy to stand, yet the problem was far from over. There were still many geese advancing toward him, and in this state, Xiao had no strength left to fight. Suddenly, a loud sound began to echo across the farm. A loudspeaker had broadcast that sound throughout the village, and all the geese immediately started running toward the source of the noise. Huang, relieved, asked if it worked as he saw the mutants fleeing. He said yes and asked if Huang could manage it. Huang smiled, confirming that as he hoped, it had succeeded. He had accessed the farm system and turned on some loud music to lure all the mutants away from them. Huang explained that the music was programmed to play at feeding time for the livestock, So when the animals heard that sound, they would immediately move to the feeding area. So with the operation plan, Huang commented that at least they got the eggs because they never wanted to go back there again. Later in the car, they realized that luckily the eggs weren't broken. Huang curiously asked when Nu had picked them up. Nu replied that when he went to catch geese, he took the opportunity to grab those eggs too. Huang was a bit suspicious. He asked if Nu was sure that when those eggs hatched, they wouldn't become mutants. Could he explain? Because those eggs had been there for at least 2 weeks. When they got home, everyone gathered to organize the plan. They were arranging groups and assigning responsibilities to each person. Mei was leading. She said that on behalf of Commander Zhou, she wanted to reinforce the future combat plan, starting with the security team. Responsible for patrolling around the base and building protective facilities, the ones in charge of this would be old Xiao and Huang. Then there was the agriculture and livestock group responsible for growing food and raising animals. Mei and Nu would handle this, especially since she now also knew how to do magical farming. The next group was resource integration, responsible for statistics, material distribution, and resource planning. Mama Chi of the family and Alcuin would be in charge of this area. Finally, the exploration group with the task of searching for resources and materials around, as well as monitoring and detecting the surrounding situation. They would be the eyes of the base. At this moment, Alcuin was almost begging Zhou to take him along on the next missions. Zhou curiously asked why he wanted to go. Lin chimed in, saying that she was afraid of what had happened to Mei earlier and wanted to go with him. She explained that she knew a safe place in the village, a place with enough resources for just the two of them. She said they could survive there until reinforcements arrived without worrying about anyone else. Zhou just stared at her, completely serious. He replied that hearing such things suggested that he would abandon his family, which was something she shouldn't dare say. He said that if she really tried to survive alone, she would be the first one abandoned. Before he left, Bing was waiting for him. She asked if they could go right now, and Zhou said yes. Of course. They then arrived at the village dock. Looking around, Bing remarked that this place was really remote, so much so that it seemed suitable for fishing. She asked if anyone had really been here before and who owned this place. Zhou explained that the owner was Ling, and that he had discovered this place occasionally, taking advantage of being asked why Ling hated Zhou so much. Zhou replied that they had started off on the wrong foot from the beginning. At school, he said Ling was always very arrogant and thought everyone had to do what he commanded. Just because he was wealthy at that time, but Zhou never liked that kind of person and had always beaten him in everything. So Lin harbored a huge grudge and even tried to steal Zhou's girlfriend, bragging about it all the time. Not that Zhou actually cared, of course. Then they went down to the basement of this place, where they found a gigantic freezer. The freezer door looked quite exaggerated. Bing wondered how he knew this place. Zhou replied that he had heard about it. In fact, he thought he had stumbled upon this place in a past life, and remembered that the resources there had lasted a long time. Opening the freezer, he recalled that in his past life when he found this place, the power was out. But surprisingly, the food was still completely fresh. This time Zhou was confident they would find good food there, maybe even some survivors hiding there. But suddenly, Bing screamed in panic. She became uneasy and commented that the fish looked a bit strange before she could finish her thought. The fish had moved even though it was dead. At that moment, Zhou jumped in, realizing it was actually a mutated fish. Even though he struck hard, Zhou's attack had no effect. The fish reacted by shooting out a jet of water. Throwing Zhou away, Zhou quickly analyzed and realized that the fish was at least a level 2 mutation. Bing was desperate. She asked if he was okay. Standing up, Zhou yelled that she had to run because he wouldn't be able to fight it in that cramped space. But suddenly, the door behind them closed automatically. Zhou realized there was no time to escape. The only choice was to kill that fish first. Bing, of course, couldn't do much other than watch Zhou and then realize the fish's weak point. It was the gills. He tried to move quickly behind the creature, aiming for the weak point, but on the way, his strike was blocked by a swarm of tiny worms. Crawling out from the fish's body, it became clear that those parasites were symbiotic with the fish's body. They protected the host whenever it was in danger. While trying to defend itself, Zhou was thrown away again, just as the fish prepared to finish him off. Zhou quickly looked around and found a fallen wire. Without thinking, he electrocuted the fish as it lay stiff on the ground. He rushed in to finish the job. Looking at the fish's body, Zhou thought that although many things were different from his previous life, most events seemed random. Just looking at that monster, he was quite sure someone had intentionally placed that bug there. Bing sighed in relief and asked if he was okay. Zhou replied yes, but clarified that this place was not safe. They then tried to open the door, but it seemed to be locked from the outside. Bing anxiously said that someone had locked them in. Zhou took a deep breath, asking her to step aside and trying to open the door with all his strength. Even with the strength of Buddha's blood, the door didn't budge. Minutes passed and they were still trapped inside. Bing tiredly said she had searched everywhere but couldn't find anything to help, stating there was no way out. Zhou looked around, realizing that the temperature in the freezer was about to drop to -1 degree Celsius. They might endure the cold, but the oxygen would run out quickly. Joe was determined to try again. But before he could do anything, Bing took a crystal bead from the fish's head, looking at it. She said she thought it could solve their problem if she swallowed it. Meanwhile, outside, people began searching for them. They had been missing too long, and something felt off. Just then, they heard a crowd approaching. This drew a lot of attention because it wasn't dark yet. But the strangest thing was someone hiding in a tree, listening to everything they said. As usual, this person seemed to always lurk in the same tree. At that moment, Joe had a flashback to his past life. He remembered waking up to screams. It was Bing shouting for him to wake up quickly because enemies were coming. She warned that there were 4 Q-level mutated dogs and 2 S-level tigers. Joe analyzed and realized they would arrive in 20 minutes. They needed to evacuate immediately. However, Bing bluntly said they didn't have enough time to escape. She said she would distract the monsters so the others could get away. Joe was shocked. He replied that the team would be completely lost without their captain, but Bing was firm, stating that at that moment, Joe still hadn't awakened his abilities, so if he insisted on staying, he would just be a burden to the group. Joe wondered why he still hadn't awakened his powers. Despite consuming a crystal, looking into Bing's eyes, he still asked her to come back safely. She replied that she would return. Suddenly, Joe woke up, realizing Bing's body was extremely hot. Startled, he asked what was happening since she seemed to be steaming. Bing felt uncomfortable. She responded that she genuinely didn't know what was happening. Her body felt strange, as if it was about to melt from the heat. Joe worriedly told her not to take off her clothes and that he would get ice to help, but he realized that all the ice around was melting. Nonetheless, he insisted she not take off her clothes, while Bing was nearly fainting from the heat and begged him to look away. She felt better but had no shirt on. Joe sighed in relief, asking if she was okay. Bing, still panting, she said yes, but warned him that she had seen zombies. There were many of them scattered everywhere. Joe told her that not panicking was her skill, and he thought he could actually detect other people's skills. Bing said she saw something underground. She affirmed that there was a lower level with many zombies. Joe thought there might be an escape route, and they explored the rest of the freezer, indeed finding a trapdoor. The door leads to a secret passage underground. As Bing starts to descend, she asks what that smell is. Joe replies that it's the smell of sulfur, explaining that it could be the stash Lin used for smuggling gunpowder. He comments that now he understands why this place is still operational and why there are so many security measures. The fish farm is just a cover. Suddenly, they hear the growl of a zombie and realize a horde is approaching. Joe says it's too dark, even he can't see. So, he said it was Bing's time now. She asked what he meant, and Joe said he knew she could do it and he believed in her. Bing then used her new ability, telling him that the first zombie was 10 meters away and it had been decapitated by Joe. With Bing pointing out where the zombies were, how many there were, and which direction they were coming from, the fight became very easy. Then they reached the actual storage. Bing asked what they would do now since there was no way out. Joe explained that there might be a waterway connected to the fish farm, so they decided to swim to get out. While swimming, Bing thought they had finally escaped, and felt happy that her skills were proving useful, but halfway through, they encountered a fish from the stories her grandparents used to tell. When she was attacked, Joe tried to grab her hand, but the fish was pulling her away. Bing intentionally let go of his hand, so Joe wouldn't be dragged along, but he remembered his past life and decided that this time, he wouldn't let that happen. He used his growth ability to make the algae grow, and they completely trapped the fish. Bing almost fainted. She saw Joe coming toward her with his power. Then she woke up on the water next to a campfire, having been very worried about Joe. He asked if she was awake, saying he had warmed up some canned food and was eating to regain energy. Before they went back, he also said they wouldn't be able to eat fish for a long time. Bing thanked him but asked about that fish. She only remembered it swimming toward her before she fainted. Joe explained that he had killed the fish, so it might have become food for another fish. He said it was just a large mutant, not particularly dangerous, but the mutation had spread throughout the country. Soon, all the fish in the world might become mutants. Suddenly, Bing shifted to another topic, saying he was very independent at school. He didn't talk to anyone, and hardly anyone interacted with him, but since all this started, he had saved many lives and risked his own for others. She asked why he did that, and Joe said initially he only saved her because he needed her to help his family. Bing said she understood but wanted to know why he continued to do so now. Joe asked her what she meant by now. Bing became shy and asked when they would go back. Joe replied that since she was awake now with the skills they had, they would be able to return easily. Back home, May says she's really worried, and Joe asks if something happened, but May replies that she'll explain once they're inside. Clearly, something did happen. Long is experiencing a mutation and is completely tied to a chair. Xiao explains that they went out to look for the two of them, because they took too long to return, and during the search, they were surrounded by a horde of zombies. Xiao says he even tried to grab a crystal from a high-level zombie, but he failed, then asks if Juan can be saved, but Joe doesn't think so because the virus has already infected his brain. Even if they used a core right now, Huang would turn into a monster like Lin Huang, realizing the situation. He requested to be killed quickly because he doesn't want to turn into a zombie. Zhou thinks he really has no choice until he sees his mother, Fang, looking very worried as well. Zhou pulls his mother into a corner, hands her a crystal, and urges her to eat it quickly. Fang asks where he got it from. Zhou replies that they got it from the fish farm, emphasizing that she needs to eat fast because they don't have much time left. Fang is skeptical about this, saying she isn't infected, so she doesn't see any reason to do so, but Zhou responds that he doesn't have time to explain and she must trust him. Zhou thinks he won't be able to hold Huang much longer and wonders if it's too late because if Huang transforms, he will have to make a decision immediately. Huang finally gives up, pleading with Zhou to kill him. Zhou clearly shocked to have to do this, while Huang says he is about to join his wife, but suddenly a green flame appears towards them, and Zhou realizes this is his mother's power, or more precisely, the power she gained through him. With this green flame, she creates a kind of blessing over Huang's head, which gradually purifies his entire body. The next moment, Huang is healed. He becomes human again. Fang's children are in shock, wondering if that is really their mother. Lao is stunned and asks if it's really her and how she got like that. Xiao wonders why everyone is staring at him like that. At that moment, no one seems to care that Huang has recovered. All focus is on Fang. The group comments that their mother has now awakened the purifying power. Lao says she used healing light on Huang and turned him back into a human. Mei says she prefers that her mother has rejuvenated. Zhou confirms this and explains that some abilities can really change the body. Fang asks if she can use it to clear acne and blackheads from her face, while Xiao asks a more serious question, wondering if it could turn the undead back into humans. Zhou used his analytical ability to explain that this power can only purify people. Not fully transformed yet, but it has a devastating effect on the already transformed undead. Lao commented that from now on they wouldn't have to worry much about infection, as Fang would be able to cleanse anyone in time. Fang replied that she understood the skills, but there was one doubt that wouldn't leave her mind. She asked Zhou how he knew she could save him. Even at that advanced stage, Zhou explained that he couldn't grasp it clearly, as if he only sensed it at that moment. He knew she would awaken that kind of ability, just as he had sensed with his brothers. Zhou's ability seemed to grow stronger, but since he couldn't sense Bing's ability, he couldn't replicate it either, leading him to think that perhaps his ability was limited to family members, and the more family members who awakened their powers, the better for him. Then Zhou was with Bing, just the two of them, and he said they could start. He asked her to check how many zombies were around. She then used her ability, and her sensing radius reached almost the entire village. She reported that there was a horde of over 100 zombies near the cave, as well as another large horde behind the mountain. Zhou asked if Bing could sense any level 2 zombies, and she replied that there were. Currently, there are 3 of them. Zhou thought this was perfect, as it would be enough for his father, Huang, and new ones to strengthen the whole family. But suddenly, Bing noticed something strange, and Zhou asked what had happened. Bing explained that the zombies were moving, and it seemed like they were moving in sync. Zhou understood that they were all heading toward Linji, and he felt surprised, because he was sure he had seen that guy on fire with his own eyes. Zhou wondered if Linji really had closed the fish factory when they were there, and he also realized that Huang being ambushed earlier might be his fault. Bing wanted to know what they would do now, and asked if they shouldn't warn everyone, and prepare to defend themselves, like last time, but Zhou replied that given the current situation, Linji would need more than a day to gather all the zombies, so instead of waiting for them to come, they would launch a surprise attack. Then, in the forest, Zhou began calling out for Linji, saying he knew he was there. Linji replied, admitting he didn't expect Zhou to come looking for him, and asked if he was walking straight to his death. Zhou countered that he was the one who pretended to be dead last time, and when Linjia told him to shut up and rushed in, Zhou easily dodged and countered, hitting Linjia's entire injured body. Zhou realized he was right. His burned body hadn't fully recovered, which was why when they were at the fish factory, Linji didn't confront them directly because he was weak. Zhou said he had always been a coward. Linji angrily replied that Zhou shouldn't be so arrogant because even though he was injured, he wasn't alone. At the same moment, as a huge explosion occurred in the forest, Zhou said he knew he had reinforcements, but also clarified that he had them too, and that he had blocked everyone in the middle of the road. This time, Linji had no way out, while the zombie horde was being destroyed by Lao's bombs, and he was laughing at how the people there were actually turning to ash, just while laughing. Lao finally fell from the tree, but it was his beloved wife who caught him. However, more zombies began to approach, and this time she used her power, summoning green flames and creating a fiery cross that incinerated all the surrounding zombies. She commented that her ability was quite inconvenient, while Lao, with love, could only gaze at her. Meanwhile, she was talking to Bing over the radio, informing that all the zombies in that area had been eliminated, and asked what the next point would be. Bing, using her skills, was guiding everyone through the village map, and when asked about her situation, she replied that she was safe, they were protecting the entrance, and she knew exactly when zombies approached. At the same time, Tio was also handling zombies very easily on her own. Lao commented that those zombies couldn't even hurt them. Little Tiu said it's all thanks to Bung for her command, which is working perfectly. And everyone said she's the current commander of the team. Bung frowned and said no, she's just helping out. Then suddenly, she noticed something strange approaching Joe. At that moment, Joe was purifying Lin Ji's body, which was blazing in blue flames, and reminded himself that he couldn't lose this time. He said that Lin Jie was completely surrounded with his zombies being wiped out, and asked if he really thought he had a chance of survival. He said it was over for him. Lin Jie replied that yes, it was over, but was interrupted to warn Joe to be careful because 3 level 2 zombies were approaching. Those are the giant mutated rats. However, Joe said those are very weak mutants in combat, and asked if Lin Jie really thought that could use that against him. Lin Jie replied that he wasn't using them to fight. He told Joe to witness their true power. Then he took crystals from each rat and swallowed them, activating their evolution. He declared that this was his true power. He had now become a level 3 mutant. Joe felt confused, thinking that level 3 is really dangerous and he needed to use all his strength to kill it right away. So he activated the blood of the Buddha, charging forward at high speed, but right in his first attack, he was countered as if it was nothing to Lin Jie. Lindsay wondered if that was really all he had when Joe threw a powerful blow. Lindsay scoffed, saying it was disappointing, and he wanted to know if that was really all he had. Joe was shocked, realizing that his power had no effect on him. Linji then pinned Joe to the ground, but Joe took advantage of the gap to escape with his growth ability. While fleeing underground, Linji shouted that it was useless. He would soon find him and kill him slowly, then wipe out his entire family. While running away, Joe had teleported to a tree trunk, thinking that this was truly the power of a level 3 mutant. He had never faced anything like this, even in his previous life, and couldn't imagine it being this powerful. He thought that even with all the prepared gear and full skills, they might not be able to handle Lin Ji, and he needed to find a solution quickly. But suddenly, he noticed the red sky. In fact, it was the moon that had turned red, and Joe realized that this was not something a level 3 mutant could create. He began to wonder what was going on. At that moment, another conflict was happening in the sky. Joe realized that there were others involved while he was distracted by that. Linji stealthily approached and asked if that skill was his, if he really thought he could distract him like that. Linji then hit Joe hard with his tail, throwing him out of the forest, leaving him stuck against a rock. Linji asked why he didn't use his ability to escape, and said that he couldn't escape anymore, that he would die here right now. But at that moment, the conflict in the sky has affected everything and everyone, as if time has completely stopped. Joe realizes he can't move his body, but he can still think and use his abilities, so he harnesses that and fires a beam of condensed laser with blue flames just as time returns to normal. Lin Ji has lost an eye destroyed by that attack, yet he simply turns his back to let Joe live and escape into the forest. His friends rush over to ask if Joe is okay. He replies that Lin Ji has escaped and is now much stronger. He also mentions that this world is becoming increasingly strange as 2 figures have just appeared in the sky, and everything is getting weirder and more dangerous. This reminds Joe of his past life when he was in a camp, essentially a camp for survivors, but he was treated like a prisoner. The mercenaries said they found him in the village and brought him there. Their boss asked how many zombies were in Kinshin village. Joe replied that there were thousands and it was very dangerous, and the mercenaries began to mock him. They said that thousands are nothing, and Joe is just another useless failure. The boss then asked which zombie had the highest rank there and how many were there. Joe replied that there was one level 4 and only one. The boss was satisfied. He said that wasn't bad and ordered Joe to be chained up, who realized at that moment that the weak people there had been turned into slaves. Joe tried to escape, but a wall of fire appeared right in front of him, blocking all exits. The leader of the mercenaries looked straight at him and asked if he really wanted to run away. Joe replied that they were very strong, that they had been chosen by the gods. The boss said that weaklings like him, becoming a slave is only natural. Then, currently, Joe is at the place where that blue light fell last night. He tells himself that maybe everything is related to some high-level skill user. He thinks it's clear. There are some guys at that level even more dangerous than zombies. Joe decides that he will investigate this situation as soon as possible. While analyzing the area, he notices a large pit as if from a meteor, and in the middle of it is a kind of intense light. Upon closer inspection, he sees that this large pit was caused by this massive crystal. At that moment, Joe wonders what exactly it is and why he suddenly feels an unreasonable craving to swallow that crystal. But before he can do anything, he notices another person approaching quickly. Instinctively, he dodges, and this person asks him who he is, and whether there really is a survivor there. This man looks at him and remarks that Joe is very alert and even has good potential. Joe, suspicious, tells him to back off and asks who he is. He then introduces himself as Shimo Takahashi, a level 3 skill user. Seeing him as a threat, Joe charges at him, but Shimo Takahashi simply teleports away. easily deflecting the blow. He laughed and said that Joe couldn't handle a joke, clarifying that he wasn't there to threaten his family or friends but for that primordial crystal. Joe asked what that crystal really was. Shimada Takahashi replied that he thought he was there to find out but quickly realized Joe was a newly awakened person. Joe remained silent, waiting for an explanation. Then Shimada Takahashi asked if he had ever played online games, explaining that the crystal was like an upgrade item. He said that skill users could evolve by consuming zombie crystals, but the maximum level they could reach was level 4. To surpass that, they needed a primordial crystal. Shimada Takahashi used his matter manipulation ability to separate a piece of the primordial crystal and tossed it to Joe. Joe was skeptical. He said it wasn't free and asked what he wanted in return. Shimada Takahashi replied that he was smart and mentioned that in the future, he would need people with potential like Joe. But before that, he advised Joe to focus on leveling up his user level. He also left a warning in this current world. There are gods. As soon as he finished speaking, he simply vanished along with the crystal, leaving Joe completely shocked. Joe had never seen anything like that, even in his past life. He wondered what the gods in this world would be like. He thought this person must be crazy, but then he recalled what that man had told him in the past and began to wonder if it could be true. Did the gods really exist in this new world? Was the disaster directly related to them? While he was lost in those thoughts, a strange energy appeared exactly where the crystal had once existed. It was another crystal, but different, not the primordial crystal. Joe wondered if that crystal had emerged from the core that existed before. Suddenly, this crystal flew straight into Joe's chest. It merged with him as if to power up his energy dramatically. His body seemed to be engulfed in an energy storm, as if an unbelievable pressure was dominating everything around him. At the same time, people were starting to search for Joe once again. As usual, some were worried, while others asked where he had gone. May noticed that a thick fog had suddenly appeared and complained that she couldn't see her brother anywhere. Xiao commented that this was strange, because today was clear and there was no reason for fog to appear. May felt uneasy. She said it didn't matter. The most important thing was that when she found her brother, she would give him a beating. Then when she saw a figure moving in the darkness, she thought it was him, and without a second thought, she struck him with her stick. Only it wasn't him, but a zombie. As soon as she realized it was a zombie, May panicked and used her power to trap that creature. At that moment, Xiao touched her shoulder, nearly making her gasp. Xiao told her to stay quiet, because right in front of them was a shape shrouded in thick mist. May fearfully asked if it was a ghost, but Xiao replied that of course. Ghosts don't exist in this world. However, that shape continued to move closer, making May even more anxious. And from her perspective, they seemed to have discovered a ghost. Xiao responded that after facing a horde of zombies, there's nothing. Suddenly, that shape simply vanished into energy, and May was completely terrified. She said it could only be a real ghost. Right after that, both of them saw a massive pillar of light shoot up into the sky, and May desperately asked exactly what was happening. She thought maybe someone was undergoing a celestial cultivation process, but Xiao complained, asking her to stop reading those manhwa since it had nothing to do with anything. Still, he decided to get closer to see what was happening. May didn't want him to go, but Xiao led the way by activating his Buddha blood ability, and she followed him, using her growing branches. As soon as they arrived, Xiao warned her that it was very dangerous there, and that she shouldn't go. But May replied that precisely because it was dangerous, she wasn't going to let him go alone. Suddenly, she saw Joe, who was being absorbed by that giant crystal, completely trapped inside an energy sphere. Xiao tried to break that barrier to save him, but she couldn't do anything, only complaining that it didn't budge. Just then, the crystal shattered, releasing a massive amount of energy, and Joe opened his eyes right in the middle of that pillar of light. Then, Joe woke up at home, lying on the bed, surrounded by very worried people. Mai said he finally woke up, and Xiao explained that he had been unconscious all day. His mother angrily complained that he had left home without treating himself properly, and worse, without bringing communication devices, but Lao asked his mother not to be too harsh. After all, everything was still okay. Now Joe, a bit confused, asked exactly what had happened, and May said she was wondering about that too. When he was suddenly surrounded by a blue light sphere that shattered, he didn't understand anything until he looked directly at May with his now blue eyes and saw many systems hovering around her. At that moment, he thought the package was complete. He had an apocalypse system, some power, and even cultivation. Looking closer at that system, he realized May, 16 years old, had a level 1 skill called ***, development ***. It even displayed exactly the items she needed to evolve to the next level, and May noticed he was acting strange. She asked if something was wrong with him, but Joe was even more confused looking at those screens, wondering what the hell was going on. He realized that he couldn't interact with them. It was like a character information panel, looking at his mother's system. He saw his mother, 52 years old, had a skill called pure radiance level 1 and needed 3 level 2 zombie crystals to evolve. However, the chance of leveling up directly to level 5 was very low. Xiao, 28 years old, had a skill Blood Buddha also at level 1 with a 12% chance to advance to level 5. It needed 2 crystals to do so. Then Joe realized, according to that information, only primordial crystals allowed evolution to higher levels. The success rate was very low, and the system didn't show what would happen if evolution failed. Even now that he had a primordial crystal, he couldn't easily use it. Moreover, he didn't have much time because he knew those guys would be back soon, so he needed to get stronger as soon as possible. Just then, Lao told him to wake up because he had been standing there thinking for a long time. Joe felt a bit confused. He asked what he was doing, and Lao replied that he had been standing there for a long time. Then looking at Lao, he saw he was 51 years old. Lao had a skill called giant transformation not awakened yet but had a 100% chance to evolve thanks to Joe's skills. Without this ability, Lao's awakening chance was only 4%. Joe replied that he was fine and they didn't need to worry about that. He thought that if it was really possible to see everyone's awakening ability, it was almost cheating. May then asked him where he was going now, and Joe replied that he wasn't going anywhere. After all, he had been there all day. He just wanted to go outside a bit to breathe some fresh air. As Joe left, he commented that he was really thoughtless. After all, everyone was really worried about him. Xiao replied that it was okay. He was probably just thinking about something. Not long after, Bing realized he had woken up and was very happy. She commented that she had prepared some food, and if he wanted, they could share. Joe thanked her, saying he was very hungry. Meanwhile, Xiao and Mei were watching the two of them. Xiao commented that Joe had clearly won her heart, and Mei replied that she had realized this a long time ago. She commented that she had prepared some food, and if he wanted, they could share. Joe thanked her, saying he was very hungry. Meanwhile, Xiao and Mei were watching the two of them. Xiao commented that Joe had clearly won her heart, to which Mei replied that she had realized this a long time ago. Then Lao, a bit relaxed, told Xiao that even Joe had a girlfriend while he was still single. He asked how long he would continue like this. Mei agreed, saying it was true because he always brought friends along, but until now she still hadn't gotten a sister-in-law. After Joe and Bing finished eating, Joe asked her if she knew where Lin was. Bing replied that she didn't know. It seemed he was beyond her ability. She commented that Joe had also looked for him but found nothing, and at that moment, Joe became pensive. Realizing he had been careless in his previous life, he was just a minor character who died among the zombies, so he never paid much attention to Lin. He never expected he would become such a threat until now. Bing noticed his worried expression and commented that he was always like this. He said that when the zombies appeared, everyone was terrified, but Joe remained calm and helped everyone through the crisis. No matter what happened, he always stayed composed, giving everyone a great sense of safety, but in her opinion, no one could bear everything alone. He said he couldn't continue carrying this burden alone forever. Then Bing shyly asked if something was bothering him. He could rely on them. After all, they were a big family now. Right after that, she became completely embarrassed. Trying to justify herself, she said she didn't mean it that way, but she considered everyone her family. Joe, who didn't understand her meaning, simply replied that it was really quiet, then looked at the people hiding on the balcony. Hearing everything, he said he had some important matters to discuss with them. At that moment, everyone looked at each other in confusion. Later, in the car, Joe explained everything to everyone and asked if they thought their abilities could strengthen. Mei wanted to know if he had found any skills. Those who could teleport, Bing excitedly said this was good news because it meant they weren't the only survivors. However, Feng disagreed, saying that in her opinion, this wasn't entirely a good thing. She explained that in peacetime, people could get along, but in an apocalyptic world, human nature completely changes. To survive, people eventually become as dangerous as the zombies themselves, and when they go mad, they become even worse. Joe said that was why they all needed to cooperate. They had to strengthen their skills, get weapons, supplies, and protect their homes. Lao agreed, saying his son was right. If someone tried to provoke them, they would definitely regret it later. They were close to the fish farm, and Lao asked his son if he really thought there was gunpowder inside. Joe confirmed that not only was there gunpowder, but also many other things. Suddenly, a loud explosion occurred at the scene, and a few armed people wearing masks started to appear. Joe was surprised, wondering where these people came from and why they were here. He quickly concluded that they must be Lin's subordinates, possibly helping him retrieve weapons from there. Joe explained that the last time he was at this fishing spot, he had locked the gate and taken the key to prevent others from discovering what was inside, but clearly, they had no hesitation in using explosives to blow the gate open. This means they know exactly that there's more gunpowder inside, and the only one who could know that is Lin. Mei remarks that it's a pity. They arrived earlier and took the supplies, but Joe responds that it's not the case. She then asks if they plan to confront that group, since they are well equipped. Joe, ignoring her question, calls Bing and asks if she can sense how many zombies are out there. Bing replies that from that distance, she can. She then analyzes the situation and reports that there are a total of 52 zombies, 45 normal ones, 6 with second-level crystals, and 1 that is completely different from the others, much larger with a black crystal. Joe says this is a third-level zombie and explains that the basement of that fish farm is very large, exactly where all the gunpowder is stored, so they can't use firearms inside, or everything will blow up. This also makes it impossible to eliminate all the zombies with conventional weapons, so they conclude that the best option is to just wait for the zombies to solve the problem for them. Mei remarks that they will watch from the sidelines, but Xiao warns them that someone is approaching. It's one of the masked mercenaries, who immediately starts shooting at them. Everyone takes cover behind the car, and Joe asks the team to split up. He says he will lead the way to buy time, activating *** Buddha's blood ***. Joe moves quickly, dodging the bullets, while Xiao also moves quickly, avoiding all the shots. As the mercenary tries to run away, Joe catches up and punches him so hard that the guy spins in the air, performing a complete 360-degree turn before falling to the ground. Joe says they will take this man for interrogation, but suddenly he realizes something is approaching. A huge explosion occurs at the same time, destroying everything in its path, including the mercenary. Joe managed to dodge but realizes they are explosive balls. At that moment, he thinks it must definitely be someone using some skill. Without wasting any more time, the explosive balls start being fired at them. One of them grazes Joe's hand, and he immediately wonders if he's okay. He replies that the wound isn't too serious, but still wants to know if anyone can see where the shots are coming from. They notice that the shots are coming from multiple directions at once. This makes it impossible to pinpoint the exact location. From the sound, it seems they were fired from very far away. Xiao observes the shooting, commenting that those balls look like the ones in a pinball machine, bouncing everywhere. The balls continue to be thrown, and the area where they stand is completely under fire. Joe thinks hiding is useless, since it seems they have been detected, but then Gao reconsiders, realizing that this seems contradictory. Throwing those balls so far yet hitting well, someone must be close enough to detect them, unless someone else is using another skill. At that moment, he notices a zombie watching them from afar. Not long after, Joe appears and tears the zombie's head off, and commented that as soon as he did that, the attack with the balls stopped. He concluded that his intuition was right. They were being watched by that zombie. He then wondered if they were dealing with 2 users of skills, but then replied that there might be even more. Just then, Mei called them, telling them to quickly return to the vehicle because strange activity was happening at the fish farm and it seemed they had been spotted. Joe said they should discuss strategy first, since they still didn't know the enemy's location. Meanwhile, the guy was playing with the balls, starting to wonder how they could escape so easily. Then he asked the fat guy why he turned off the overall vision mode. The fat guy replied by asking if he didn't see that the zombie had been kicked in the head, so there was no way they could see. He also commented that those people were definitely not normal. They had very high skills. The fat guy then asked why he killed the people they had hired, and how he would explain that to their boss. The guy with polka dots replied that if they were discovered, just eliminate everyone and say it was those 2 kids who did it. He also pointed out that the initial deal was to eliminate the zombies from the fishing area, and it's normal for people to die in the process. Just then, an old man appeared and asked them to stop playing around. He told them that the warehouse door was open, so they should get back to work. Meanwhile, at home, Lao informed them that he had finished checking, and no one was following them. Mei asked if they had been spotted because the group started shooting at them as soon as they saw them. Joe then said that their main objective was still to take all the supplies from the fish farm until they achieved that. They shouldn't mess things up. However, as soon as they finished taking everything, there would definitely be a knock on the door. At that moment, everyone fell silent, a bit shocked. Mei then tried to calm them down by saying they shouldn't worry too much because Joe himself had commented that there was a level 3 zombie there, so they wouldn't easily defeat him. But Xiao warned that there were also skill users among them, so they could deal with high-level zombies as well. Mei then asked what they should do. Fang replied that if they dared to attack, they just needed to watch. Lao agreed, saying that anyone who dared to harm this family would be heavily beaten. He then looked at Mei and told her that she would help prepare explosives later. Joe thought about that, recalling that in his previous life, it took someone 2 months to find that village, but this time it only took a week. Looking at the gear of the mercenaries, he realized that they might be from the military, or a similar military group. He also thought that compared to the firepower they currently had, they weren't even close, not to mention the skill users who were with them. If those people managed to kill the zombies in the warehouse and absorb the crystals, they would become more dangerous by gaining new skills. Joe realized that if things continued like this, he would have no way out. While he was thinking about this, Bing walked closer to him, held his hand, and said he shouldn't worry too much. She told him he should trust his family more. At that moment, Huang's voice suddenly came from the radio. Calling them, Joe replied that he was listening and asked what had happened. Juan explained that they were at the equipment store, and something strange had occurred there. They found a living person lying on the floor of the store. Joe immediately demanded to tie that person up. Huang was confused and asked what was going on. Joe replied that he would explain later but insisted they tie the person up immediately. He also said he would go to the store and the rest of them should take care of the house on the way. Joe started to wonder if that person was a spy. He knew he couldn't let that person escape. Just then Alcuin showed up and told them they had been to the hospital that morning, and they had successfully taken a lot of medicine and medical supplies. Joe, who was in a hurry, just quickly thanked him and continued on. This made Alcuin a bit annoyed. When they arrived at the store, Joe asked where that person was. Huang replied that she was right in front of him. Tied up, upon closer observation, Joe realized that this was really very strange because the person didn't seem to be one of the mercenaries. As he looked closer at the person's face, he was surprised to recognize it was Takahashi, the one who had given him the primordial crystal. Suddenly, when he woke up, Takahashi screamed loudly and disappeared. Joe then tried to calm him down, saying that they knew each other, but Takahashi, holding Lynch hostage, demanded that no one come near him. Huang tried to defuse the situation, saying he wasn't there to hurt him, but Takahashi was very frightened, saying that he knew they wanted to kill him and kept telling them to keep their distance. Joe remained calm, saying it was fine. If they wanted, they could attack the girl. Takahashi was surprised, asking if he thought he couldn't do it. Joe replied that he didn't know if he had enough courage, but if he really could then, he would have done it a long time ago if they really wanted to kill Takahashi. They had done it already. Takahashi then asked why he was tied up. Joe replied that a stranger had appeared at their home, so what did they expect? Takahashi wondered if they were the bad guys. Joe, a bit suspicious, turned back to ask, wanting to know what he thought. Without much ceremony, Takahashi said he wanted to eat meat noodles. Right after that, he sat down to eat meat noodles. Everyone was cheerful as if nothing had happened, while everyone looked at him with a bit of suspicion. Xiao asked if this guy was really the same person Joe had met on the mountain that day when he took the crystal. Mei looked closely and remarked that to her, he looked just like an ordinary old man. KB didn't care much and just said he wanted another bowl. Joe thought this was really strange. Takahashi seemed completely different than before, and moreover, he couldn't remember anything about their meeting. Checking the system, he saw Takahashi was at level 78 with chaos attributes. His skill is level 1 teleportation, and to evolve, he needs 2 level 2 cores, with only a 17% chance of reaching level 5. Joe wondered why he was currently at level 1 when he had previously claimed to be at level 3, making him suspect if Takahashi was pretending not to know him. Is he lying, or has he really lost his memory? Meanwhile, Takahashi finished another bowl and wiped his mouth, saying it's been a long time since he had such a good meal. He thanked them a lot, saying that without them, he might have starved to death. Joe impatiently stated that if he really wanted to thank them, he should tell them everything he knows. Takahashi looked a bit confused and asked what he knew. Joe got straight to the point and wanted to know why he appeared in the village. Takahashi replied that it was a bit complicated to explain, and they might not even believe him, but he said he escaped by teleportation. Joe remained calm, asking exactly where he escaped from. Takahashi explained that he fled from zombies, saying he was chased to the outskirts of the city. In desperation, he closed his eyes, activated teleportation, and fell into the village, noticing everyone was very calm. No one seemed to doubt that he used teleportation, which surprised him a bit. The elder just asked if he was from the city. Takahashi confirmed that he is Xiao Shu, and soon wanted to know how things were there. Mai asked if the military had been mobilized yet, and whether the zombies had been eliminated. Takahashi explained that it was not the case. The city was in terrible condition. On the first day zombies appeared, the streets became completely chaotic. Many people were bitten and turned into zombies, while others died in bloodbaths, collisions, and car accidents. He said he had to hide in a trash can, hoping someone would come to rescue the survivors. By the second day, he realized there would be no rescue. The city was completely overrun by zombies, and the survivors were utterly desperate. Some even chose to commit suicide out of despair. Hearing all this, he asked Takahashi to get straight to the point without too many details. Takahashi then admitted that he had thought about suicide, but it was at that moment that he received a strange message. The message said that those struggling against death should eat the crystals in the heads of zombies, so they could become the chosen ones of God. Joe immediately felt suspicious, wondering who sent this message. He also thought that in his previous life, it took more than a month for people to start discovering their abilities. And regarding the use of the crystals, how did this person know about that? On the second day, Joe began to wonder if the message sender was like him, someone who had been reborn. Xiao curiously asked if the villagers knew about the crystal cores yet. Takahashi wanted to know if they had seen it. Mai replied that not only had they seen it, but 3 people had eaten some. Takahashi asked if they had all awakened their powers yet, and Xiao confirmed that yes, they all had. Takahashi then commented that they were really lucky, because if his team was that lucky, things would have been different. Takahashi explained that on the third day, to survive, he joined a group of about 100 people, stating that besides gathering supplies, they also went out to hunt zombies, and after 2 days they found 5 crystals. Then the 5 leaders in the group decided to consume these crystals. However, only one of them succeeded in awakening their spiritual power. The other 4 turned into monsters and were killed by the only surviving leader. On the 4th day, the group started to compete with another team, and as the battle between them intensified, a need arose for more powerful individuals, so he and many others were forced to consume the crystals in hopes of awakening. However, many of those ended up turning into monsters and were killed. The rest were drawn into the unending battle, and gradually, everyone began to become bloodthirsty and completely insane. Takahashi said he couldn't stand living in that situation anymore and luckily escaped. That's when he was chased by a group of zombies. But fortunately, his powers awakened just in time. He activated teleportation and escaped. Xiao exclaimed that even those with skills were killing each other for resources. May heard all of this, saying that after hearing this, she would rather stay in the village. The city seemed too scary. Takahashi agreed and said that staying in the village was much better. Even the food was tastier. He also mentioned that he decided to stay there with them, but the other 2 didn't really agree. Only Joe explained that unfortunately, that place wasn't as safe as he had imagined. They had encountered some issues recently, and if Takahashi wanted to continue enjoying food, drinks, and a place to live, he would have to help them deal with this enemy after they left. When asked if the interrogation was over, Joe confirmed that it had ended temporarily. He also mentioned that Takahashi would stay to help. Takahashi then formally introduced himself, thanking them for the meal. And shortly after, everyone else began to introduce themselves, bowing and calling each other brother, sister, uncle, and aunt. This made May wonder why he called them that. When he looked over 30 years old, Takahashi replied as naturally as possible that he was only 18. At that moment, everyone fell silent in surprise. May couldn't believe it and asked if he was really 18 with that face. Takahashi confirmed it, saying he just looked older but was actually only 18. Joe said he believed him, and Takahashi thanked him, saying he thought Joe would be a hard person to work with, but in reality, he seemed to be the most open-minded one here. Joe thought that actually, the only reason he wasn't shocked now was because he had been shocked before when seeing Takahashi's age in the system. Not wasting any time, he said they didn't have much time and everyone should follow him. Takahashi felt a bit lost. When asked where they were going, Joe replied that he would find out soon. Then Bing appeared and handed Joe something before they left. She said she found that item among the weapons they recovered and thought it would suit him. She wasn't sure if he would like it. But he looked at the blade's name and saw it was called Genhai. Joe said he really liked it. Before leaving, he told him they would be back in an hour and if anything happened, to let him know while they were on their way. Takahashi asked exactly where they were going. Joe answered that they were heading to a place he knew well, the same place he found the core last time. Takahashi was startled and asked if it was that far, wondering if they were going by car. Joe replied no. It would actually be Takahashi who would transport them. Takahashi nervously said he had never teleported like this before, and asked if it was safe. Joe replied he would only know if he tried. Takahashi took a deep breath. He asked him to hold on tight, activated the teleport, and they actually arrived in the city, appearing on top of a building. They almost fell, but Joe managed to catch Takahashi. Joe commented that it looked like they were north of the village. Takahashi replied that they should leave that for later, and it would be better to pull him out first. Joe realized they had moved 3 kilometers in one go. They weren't in the city yet, but in the village. Joe said they would teleport once more and move behind the mountain. He explained that all of this was part of the test of Takahashi's abilities. They teleported again, and this time they ended up on top of a tree. Joe was a bit annoyed. He asked if he could stop making those weird noises. Takahashi nervously said it was because he had never teleported like this before, let alone with someone else. Joe replied that they were close to their destination and all they needed to do was be patient a little longer. Takahashi tiredly asked if he could take a break. Joe said no because time was passing. They finally arrived at the mouth of the pit. Takahashi asked if it was right there. Joe confirmed that it was exactly that place. Then he analyzed Takahashi's performance and realized that based on this test, he understood the basics of his abilities. To be honest, Takahashi's teleportation ability was much worse than he imagined. The most important aspect of teleportation was accuracy, and he still couldn't control his position well. Moreover, teleportation was draining a lot of energy from his body. Takahashi felt a bit uncomfortable, saying it wasn't great but good enough. Isn't it? Joe replied that it was good enough but wondered how long he would pretend. Jojo was surprised. He asked what he meant by that. Joe explained that since they first met, he had been very clear about Takahashi's true strength. So he told him to stop pretending and asked him what he really wanted in their home. Takahashi shrugged, saying he's feeling confused that he just came to their house to have a meal with Joe and then charged at him trying to hit him. And Takahashi had to dodge using teleportation. He ran away, screaming that Joe is a killer. I wonder if he's really not faking it. He started to wonder what happened to this guy, and if he really was the Takahashi he had met before. Takahashi took a deep breath. Saying he was tired of all this, he said if they were going to fight, then he wouldn't run away from the battle. So he charged at Joe, but Joe just stepped aside and dodged. Takahashi ended up rolling on the floor like a pile of trash and complained that it hurt. Joe tried to hold back a laugh, saying at least he didn't run away from the fight, so maybe he could actually be useful for the team. Takahashi got up and asked if this was a test because he was so scared that he actually thought Joe would kill him. Joe replied that it was time to get back, because they still needed to deal with the issue they had talked about earlier. Then in the forest, everyone was ready. Joe explained that the fish camp was a kilometer away as agreed. He, Xiao, and Takahashi would lead the way, while Bing and Xiao would stay behind to support. Takahashi skeptically asked if they really needed to do that, since those people hadn't provoked them, so why cause trouble? Joe replied that it wasn't like that because those people would do anything to get supplies. If they didn't act right now, they would be in danger later. Joe also clarified that if Takahashi wanted, he could go back, but Takahashi took a deep breath and said he didn't want to go back, he was just worried. Xiao reminded him that they had agreed on the plan earlier, and that this mission wasn't even that risky. Takahashi nervously said that if he was saying that, then fine. Before everything happened, at home, Lau asked Joe if he was crazy for wanting to go into that farm. Joe explained that it wasn't to confront anyone, but to steal. If they managed to get the supplies and gunpowder, there would be no reason for those mercenaries to stay. This would also prevent them from being attacked later, plus the gunpowder would be very useful for them. Lau agreed and said that made sense, but commented that he was very curious to see how Joe would handle the explosives. Xiao pointed out that the farm's security might be very strict, and asked how they would get everything out once inside. Joe replied that on their own, they really couldn't do it, but with Takahashi's help and his teleportation ability, everything could work out very well. Takahashi asked if Joe really wanted to take such a risk, but Joe replied that he didn't need to worry because they would protect him, and if he was in danger, he just needed to teleport out. Joe also said that the whole family was counting on him. Right now, Takahashi thought that he had agreed to this very impulsively. After all, he just wanted a peaceful life. Meanwhile, Bing handed Joe a walkie-talkie saying that he could contact her any time. Joe then asked her if she could see the situation at the fish farm. From then on, when she looked, she realized that the number of zombies had decreased significantly compared to before, with the remaining ones being level 2 and level 3 zombies. Joe realized that the enemies had started to move and said they needed to hurry. He also told his mom about Bing. She told him not to worry because she would protect her, so he could go with peace of mind. Joe agreed and they set off, the two siblings sharing the Buddha bloodline. Along with Takahashi using his teleportation ability, when they arrived, they realized there were indeed people on guard. They were the armed mercenaries they had seen before, but Xiao commented that there were far fewer of them than before. Joe explained that their main forces were probably underground. Kill the zombies and asked Bing to report the situation. Bing reported that the level 3 zombies were in the southeast corner, and they hadn't moved, while the level 2 zombies were concentrated in the middle area, but 2 of them had been eliminated. Joe then said that the battle had started and inferred that the northwest corner was definitely safe by now. Joe said he would go with Takahashi to scout the route while Xiao should wait. Joe asked Takahashi if he saw the destination, and he confirmed it, saying it was about 10 meters below. Takahashi replied that he was ready and told him to hold tight and teleport straight into the warehouse. Takahashi almost said something, but Joe covered his mouth, asking him to be quiet, and warned him that the enemy hadn't arrived yet. However, Takahashi realized there was no gunpowder there but some weapons instead. Xiao started to worry since it had been a while since they disappeared, then suddenly they teleported back with all the necessary supplies. Not gunpowder, but a lot more guns. Joe said they also got medical supplies and military rations. Now he understood why so many wanted to loot that warehouse. However, Joe warned that they still needed to go back and clean the place out completely, and Xiao asked to go along this time. Takahashi said he would try to take him with him, while the zombies were being killed by the guy with the ball, and when one of them tried to attack him from behind, it ended up getting killed by the fat guy, who commented that there were a few level 2 zombies around, and the old man replied that it was perfect because with them gathered together, it would be easy to find the crystals, without having to search too hard. However, the guy with the ball complained that they actually wanted to encounter level 3 zombies. The fat guy replied that it was interesting since he had never tried controlling a level 3 zombie, but the old man explained that this type of zombie was not easy to handle either. Both could die if they encountered one of them. They were clearly very confused by this information until then. A mercenary appeared, saying he had been bitten and was calling for help from the man with the ball, saying they wouldn't let him die like this, but to survive, he would have to eat a crystal. If lucky, he would become one of them. The mercenary hesitated, clearly scared of the man with the ball. The man with the ball asked him if he was afraid and wanted to become a zombie, saying he didn't need to be scared because they were the chosen ones, However, before anything could happen, another mercenary shot the head of the transforming man, killing him on the spot. The man with the polka dots was furious and asked what that meant, but the mercenary replied that it was obvious and told the mutant to step aside. The man with the ball asked him if he wanted to die, but the old man interrupted and told him to stop arguing because teamwork was the most important thing. The old man also commented that one of the most interesting parts of being a teacher was being able to prune the right branches. He also warned that the smell of sulfur was everywhere, and if that mercenary shot again, everyone there would die. The mercenary was extremely frustrated, but he had no choice but to accept the order. Then he commanded everyone to kill only with knives and not shoot at all. Takahashi kept teleporting more goods, and Joe said that should be enough for the whole family. He commented that he didn't expect everything to go so smoothly. He then asked if Takahashi was okay and if he could keep going. Takahashi replied that he was fine, but admitted that moving so many boxes continuously was really tiring. Xiao suggested they could take a break before continuing, but Joe replied that they couldn't, because the level 2 zombies wouldn't hold out long. He asked Takahashi once again if he could handle it, and he confirmed he could. No problem with that. The three of them teleported back, but as soon as they arrived, Takahashi collapsed from exhaustion. Xiao asked if he was tired, and Joe replied that he had probably overexerted himself and collapsed. Joe asked Xiao to help Takahashi. While he went to fetch the goods alone, meanwhile, another group was approaching and about to open the medical room's door, where they were hiding. The three of them fell completely silent, trying not to get detected. The guy with the ball remarked that there were really a lot of supplies in there. It was no wonder they were so reckless. There was enough supplies for everyone to survive for months. The professor reminded them that according to the contract, the food and medicine were theirs. The mercenary replied that of course it was, but suddenly, one of the mercenaries shot the professor in the head, killing him. The other two were also attacked and fell. The mercenary started mocking them, saying they were really foolish. He asked them if they really thought they would easily hand over the goods like that. The commander explained that they were just lucky mutants who had gained some cool powers. But he asked if they really thought he would share the goods. He said if they wanted more benefits, they needed more power. Only the guy with the ball was laughing in his face. The commander angrily asked why he was laughing. The ball guy replied that in this post-apocalyptic world, normal strength had lost its value. The only rule in this new world was that life belongs to those who adapt best. The old man who had been shot in the head stood up again, his head completely regenerated. The commander, scared, shot him multiple times, but realized that the bullets didn't hurt him at all. In desperation, he ordered the mercenaries to kill them all, but at that moment, the mercenaries themselves were killed by another mercenary who had turned into a zombie. Joe looked on and said he had predicted something like this would happen. He looked at Takahashi, who still hadn't woken up, and realized they couldn't escape at this moment because they didn't have the ability to teleport. He hoped that maybe Takahashi would wake up in time, but he also knew they couldn't just rely on that. Meanwhile, the commander was completely panicking. Begging them not to come near him, he screamed that he had powerful allies and they couldn't kill him. The teacher then asked if he really had powerful allies, and he said unfortunately, if he did, they were probably just corpses. He explained that when they arrived at the fishing spot, the assassins were ready, of course. They never considered the possibility of cooperation from the start. Just like they did with others, they simply eliminated them. He continued to say that in this world, two eras cannot coexist. The era of the commander has ended. He then shot the commander's bullet straight into his head, killing him instantly, and the professor then spoke to the zombie-turned-mercenary, that there are still people out there and he should take care of them, but he replied that he hadn't even properly adapted to his new body yet. The guy with the polka dots asked if he had started to slow down, and the fat guy who possessed that bald head replied that this wasn't the first time he had done this. Now that body was his and there weren't many choices left. He went out to deal with the others. The guy with the basketball looked around and wondered how they would move all by themselves now. The teacher said there was no need to rush. First, they had to eliminate the rats immediately. Joe realized they were talking about them. The teacher explained that the ground outside the wet fishing area was sticky and would cling to their shoes, so they could easily be tracked. He also said that these young ones needed discipline and asked if they intended to show up or would he need to invite them. At this point, the brothers began to prepare their powers and Joe moved straight towards him. The guy with the basketball recognized him, asking if he was the one from the beginning and complaining that they hadn't met before. As the guy with the basketball threw an energy ball, Joe managed to block the attack. The guy still mocked him, asking if they had been hiding like rats all this time, but Joe realized that his plan had succeeded. He was behind the guy. And in the next second, he slammed the guy's head into the ground, knocking him out. Joe remarked that one less enemy was taken care of. Still, he knew he couldn't be complacent. Because the old man there would be much harder to deal with. This old man was named Shenghui, a level 2 mutant with supercell abilities. Shenhui was looking at them with a calm yet frightening demeanor. As the two brothers attacked with Buddha blood, Joe quickly realized that his skin was as tough as steel. So, Both decided to use his strategy. Joe merged his power with the power of growth and attacked from one side, while his brother struck from the other side with Buddha blood, hoping to cause some internal damage. However, they soon realized that the old man was still standing firm. He was indeed a true mutant and had absorbed part of their power. Shen Guai commented that he was truly impressive, saying that the quality of that ability was very good, and asked if Joe had more than one power. He also said they would be more than qualified to join his group. Xiao, confused, asked what it meant to join him, and Sheng Hui replied that they were here for the supplies, right? So if they joined him, they could also get the supplies. Joe responded that he clearly wouldn't trust them, but Shen Hui said they were different from the remnants of the old world. Now, superheroes were destined to rule this world. Joe then asked, what about ordinary people? What would happen to them? Shen Guai replied that they would be the stones, used to build the walls of the new world. Joe looked serious and asked about the stones while holding his knife, clearly ready to execute his plan. He then asked if their idea was to enslave humanity. Cheng Hui asked if he saw the new world, and Joe replied that he didn't even need to see it with his own eyes. Just looking at that annoying old man was enough to know. At that moment, Joe lifted Takahashi, who was still unconscious, and told him they could leave when he passed by the old man. He said he would find each of them individually and drag them all down to hell before leaving. Joe threw a lighter right onto the gunpowder, causing an explosion that destroyed the entire warehouse. At the same time, Bing was very worried. She asked if they heard anything, because she hadn't had any contact, and said she felt an explosion earlier but couldn't see anything now. Then she realized that in the warehouse, third-level zombies had escaped. They had taken advantage of the explosion and were now free. Amid the ruins of the warehouse, the brothers were leaving. Joe said everything was fine and he was okay. They asked about Takahashi, and Joe said he was fine, just sleeping. Xiao was impressed. He said that guy still hadn't woken up despite all the noise. He was truly on another level. He also commented that it was a pity the supplies had blown up. Joe replied that it was better this way than to fall into the hands of bad people. As they left, Joe commented, it seemed that Sheng Hui knew quite a bit about these superheroes. Joe remarked that he didn't know much about them, only that they were a bunch of arrogant kids like Linji, and that they all needed to be eliminated. Then he said they had to go back now, but suddenly, the debris started shaking and something appeared from it. Of course, it was the old man Sheng Hui, who was still alive and completely intact. As if nothing had happened, Bing was even more worried. She warned them that the third-level variant was moving, and they needed to get out of there immediately. Fang tried to calm her down, telling her not to panic, because the signal probably wouldn't work well underground. He also remarked that Takahashi would definitely be able to escape any danger by using teleportation. Fang didn't miss the opportunity to tease her, saying she never expected to see Bing worried about her kid and that she didn't think she was a good mother. Bing replied that it wasn't like that, or maybe it was, at least when it came to him. Fang then recalled that when their father awkwardly handled explosives in the mine, she always worried. After all, she feared that one day he would do something crazy and blow himself up. She also said that just worrying doesn't help. Sometimes you have to take practical action. Fang agreed with herself, saying that when you can't trust men, it's best to let women handle things. She was prepared for a fight, determined to solve the problem alone. Meanwhile, Sheng Wei was causing trouble for the brothers, even as both used the power of the Buddha bloodline. The battle was extremely tough. Xiao asked if that old man was stronger. Joe replied that it was the power of the supercells. Shang Hui was even more impressed, saying that Joe even knew the name of his ability. Joe explained that Shang Hui's cells had a new defense mechanism. When his body is threatened, his cells would enhance based on the level and nature of the threat. He also said that when this ability reached level 2, the cells would not only protect themselves but also absorb and convert the threat into more power, which is why he is so strong now. Sheng Wei then charged in with a lethal blow. Both managed to dodge and tried to counterattack using the Buddha bloodline, but the strikes didn't even leave a scratch on him. Shen Guai then countered with such force that it sent both flying. Xiao fainted right then, leaving only Joe standing, now fighting alone with both of his powers. As Joe attacked, Shen Guai easily blocked the blow and even explained that his cells were getting stronger. He said that the higher the threat, the stronger he became as long as his cells were active. Meanwhile, the women were getting closer to the chaotic scene. Bing looked at some corpses on the ground and asked if it was the work of her brother. Fang replied that it wasn't because the dead had been shot. Then they heard another gunshot. Another mercenary was killed, then that fat man appeared, possessing the body of a mercenary. He complained that once again he had gotten blood on his clothes. With a cold look, he said he wouldn't let anyone survive, so he killed the last living mercenary. The mercenary realized there were 2 other women there and ordered them to drop their weapons. When asked what they would do now, Fang said to let her handle it, so they surrendered. The mercenary looked at them and commented that they seemed a bit out of place. He asked if they were working with the 2 who raided the warehouse, but then commented that they were actually very beautiful women. with their smooth skin. By this point, he even called his son, but it was clearly just a distraction. When he turned his back, Fang seized the opportunity and quickly disarmed him. The mercenary was surprised by her skills, and instead of calming down, he became even more excited, saying that this only made him more interested in having fun with her. Meanwhile, Joe was being hung up by Sheng Wei. Someone commented that he's never met anyone like him. He said that Joe has the ability to sense power instantly and still uses two different kinds of strength. Sheng Hui said that Joe seems to have seen the new world and ordered him to reveal all its secrets. At that moment, Joe sensed a chill in the air approaching. Sheng Wei insisted that he must speak, but Joe just laughed. Sheng Wei asked what he was laughing at, and Joe replied that he was laughing at his own foolishness and arrogance. Thinking that he was chosen by the gods, believing that he could become the ruler of this world, he viewed others as slaves and corpses as prey. He said that ultimately, that would be his downfall. Sheng Wei became angry and tightened his grip on Joe's neck even more. Then he threw him to the ground, causing Joe to spit blood. Sheng Wei responded that those were just empty words. Even Joe didn't believe them, but Joe said that if there truly are gods in this world, then Sheng Wei is just a child abandoned by them. That statement infuriated Sheng Wei completely, and he began preparing for an attack, but Joe managed to dodge at the last second. At that moment, Sheng Wei realized that something strange was happening. A cold hand gripped his leg, and he looked up in panic. He recognized that it was a level 3 zombie. Sheng Wei asked if Joe had tricked him, and Joe replied that he couldn't defeat it alone. But perhaps with support, it could be done. The zombie felt very cold and said that it wanted that fire while advancing towards Sheng Wei. Forcing him to focus on the fight, Joe took the opportunity to pull his brother Xiao, who was still unconscious, and started dragging him away. Planning to escape while Sheng Wei was busy with the zombie, at the same time, Fang was defeating the mercenary, hitting him relentlessly, while being observed. Thinking that this little ant was really strong, even the mercenary felt furious, asking how he could be a martial arts coach and still lose to a little girl. Fang replied that if he was a coach, he was like a really bad sparring partner. The mercenary shouted in anger that he would kill her and tried to grab her gun. At that moment, Fang told Bing to hand her the steel pipe. As soon as she received it, she simply brought the strong pipe down on the mercenary's head and without hesitation, stabbed into his brain. Killing him on the spot, Fang then looked at him and told him to never underestimate her again. Shortly after, she ordered Bing to lead the way. Just then, the soul possession invaded Sia's body, but Sia reacted in time and prevented it from attacking Bing. Fang saw this and ordered it out of the girl's body. The possessing soul felt confused, wondering how she could resist, as theoretically her consciousness should have been wiped out by him. But Xiao replied that his soul was too weak to achieve that. The possessor then realized that he was being completely burned away by some strange energy and asked what that fire was. In the next moment, he was completely purified by Chia, with no chance to resist while Sheng Wei had defeated the zombie and was panting heavily. Asking Joe if he thinks he can fool him like this, he said he understands that this whole thing is just a trap to try to escape, and called that plan a dirty trick. Sheng Hui said that Joe would die on the spot, but before he could do anything, his chest was pierced by a third-rate zombie. He could hardly react as his cells froze and went inactive. He couldn't regenerate, and within seconds, he was completely disintegrated by the zombie. Now the third-rate zombie was charging straight at Joe. Pleading for warmth, craving energy, Joe lunged forward and managed to strike, but his sword was instantly frozen upon contact. He realized that everything he touched was freezing. He could hardly move his hand as the wound on his neck still hadn't healed, was also starting to freeze. Yet Joe still tried to push on, but at the crucial moment, the zombie was struck in the head by a purifying flame. It was Chia, who had asked if her son needed help. Joe was surprised and asked if they had arrived. Both asked him if he was okay. Noticing his hand was freezing, Joe replied that he was fine, that his brother was hurt much worse. Fang looked at the zombie and asked if it was really a monster. Joe confirmed, and Fang furiously said that if it dared to touch his family, then it would have to die now. She launched a purifying strike, but the zombie defended itself, had frozen its body, and was almost unharmed. Just then Joe, who had repositioned himself, appeared behind it, with the sword wrapped in purifying flames. As he stabbed the frozen zombie in the chest, it simply exploded, disintegrating. Joe sighed in relief and said it was finally over. Chia commented that she didn't expect it to be so difficult, and now the family could reunite in peace. But Bing looked closely and realized that no, it wasn't dead yet. Suddenly, a gigantic ice wall rose behind them. Fang immediately tried to launch another purifying strike, but the zombie protected itself again. Joe charged forward with his sword but couldn't break through that ice wall. He realized he couldn't deal enough damage to that damn monster. The only way was to finish it off with a single blow, otherwise, it would keep regenerating forever. Looking around quickly, Joe noticed a crystal on the ground, and wondered if that crystal belonged to the previous people. Meanwhile, Chia was fighting directly with the zombie. She thought that damn monster was really strong and wasted no time sending Bing to fetch Xiao, who was badly injured, and take him away. Bing ran and thought it was terrible, that her skills were useless in direct combat, so she decided she needed to improve her gun usage. That's how she could help in any way possible. Amidst this chaos, at the same time Fang was wondering where her son was when suddenly she was hit by an ice crystal. Knocked back and spitting out a lot of blood, Joe saw this and yelled, asking if that zombie was caught off guard. He said that if anyone dared to touch his family, they would have to face him, and at that moment, the system activated. It announced that Joe's Buddha blood had evolved, and his body erupted with power so intense that just one punch was enough. He threw the zombie away, but the zombie got back up and tried to fight back, shooting out dozens of ice spikes. But with just one strike, Joe sliced through everything in front of him, including the zombie, which was torn in half and ultimately defeated. When dawn arrived, Joe took a deep breath and said it was time to go home, and that was the end. Everyone, we've completed another crazy chapter of this amazing work. If you enjoyed this epic battle, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos. And if you want to support the channel even more, consider becoming a member. The story has ended.